welcome to first lecture. This will be a short course. It would be wrong to call it crash course, but crash course के अलावा कोई नाम है नहीं. Of 3 weeks, there will be 1 week of culture, 1 week of modern India, and 1 week of world history. We'll start with culture first. Now, how many of you have given mains before? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay. Half of you have given mains before. Now, what you may have seen is that either culture questions are very factual, very difficult, or very random. Or attend kaise kare. Now, I want to get one thing out of the way first. Culture questions are not difficult. It is the approach that most of us have not developed over time because nobody has taught us. Simple baat. So, our idea is not to learn entire ancient medieval culture in 1 week, which is impossible to do. What we shall do is whatever you have learned so far to clear the prelims, which is enough. That content is enough. We want to translate that content into a good answer. And for that, what we shall do will not go chronologically, we will go thematically. For 6 days, we have picked up 6 major themes in which we classify all the major culture questions. And in every theme, we'll take some questions which are representative, like 5 to 7 questions, which we'll write in the class and then discuss them, so that through them you develop some structures, some templates, some dimensions which will be applicable to all other questions. तो अभी एक हफ्ते में 30-25 क्वेश्चन कर लेंगे, 30-25 themes अपने कवर हो जाएंगे एकदम डिटेल, and those will be generic themes in such a way that whatever questions may come, you will be able to apply them, and you will also learn how to think about them. Before that, एक customary keys होती है, small thing that we have to go through previous year questions to understand what kind of questions have been asked. So there are 24 questions in last 10 years, around 2.5 questions every year. If you go through them, some questions are very year specific, because in that specific year there was certain important debate that was going on in news media. That is why that question was asked. So the chances of repetition of those themes are extremely minimal. Now, because you are looking at these questions for the first or second time, maybe you don't know कि उस समय का current affair क्या था. अब I am in the process for last 10-12 years, so I know कि कौन सा question current affair से प्रेरित है. So, for example, this question discuss the significance of lion and bull figures in Indian mythology, art, and architecture. Now, this question does not mean that you start looking at all the symbolism and iconography of every Indian motif and symbol or semiotics. It is not required. ये क्वेश्चन क्यों आया था? एवरीबडी नोस लास्ट ईयर बिकॉज ऑफ द पार्लियामेंट के ऊपर एक स्ट्रक्चर को, स्कल्पचर को अनवेल किया था. इट क्रिएटेड लॉट ऑफ इंटेंस डिबेट. सिमिलरली, यू हैव वन मोर क्वेश्चन, safeguarding the Indian art heritage is the need of the moment. Discuss. Now, this question seems very generic. So, it seems that question is very generic and time agnostic. But that year, the government had brought some scheme in which the monuments were kind of given to be managed by private companies under CSR. So that scheme became controversial. So the question became there. Likewise, you have one more question, perhaps the very famous question, that how far the Indus Valley civilization can inform our present urbanization. हर टीचर पढ़ाता है, पता नहीं आज क्यों पढ़ाता है वो. The reason is that in that year we have the beginning of Smart City Mission. So it was a flagship scheme of central government. So the question was asked. So there is a chance, even in the modern India, you have couple of questions like that. मौलाना अबुल कलाम आजाद का कुछ इशू चल रहा था, क्वेश्चन पूछा गया, pre and post independence contribution of Abul Kalam Azad. It won't be repeated like this. Similarly, there was one more question about the contribution of Indian diaspora, especially labor who went outside in 19th century in various forms. The reason was V.S. Naipaul had passed away. V.S. Naipaul was a great Nobel laureate, and he was in the family of such ex-immigrants who went outside India from Bihar at a point of time. So that's a साल पहले. तो वो गुजर गए थे, तो इशू बन गया, तो सवाल पूछ लिया. So even in modern and in culture, you see sometimes questions are very topical. If you are able to pick up those things very quickly, आपका आंसर तो लग जाता है. But even if you don't, does not matter. My only point is, when you analyze the questions, the previous year questions, don't try to extrapolate too much from those themes. Those themes might not mean something today as they did in that year. That is one single point. Secondly, have you read all the questions? आपने questions देखे हैं पहले सारे? So what I have done, you'll get the handout also, don't worry. What I have done is to categorize them in 3 parts, just to give you a glimpse of what is expected by UPSC. What you will see here is that first categorization is based on era. It could be ancient, early medieval, medieval, or overall era. Some art form, let us say they are asked about Indian sculptural history. It could be ancient, early medieval, middle, they don't specify. So it is like a cross chronological question. So one first is that categorization. Second is about which kind of art form. Now, as we all of us know, there are 3 types of art forms that we have to study. I hope you know some basic things. That first of all, you should know there is visual arts. Then you have literary arts and performing arts. That is all. And apart from that, the 4th thing that we have is religion. These are the only 4 major baskets from which questions are asked, because these are the only 4 baskets which are in the syllabus. Now, inside visual arts, you will have sculpture and painting. Inside performing art, you have dance, drama, music, and all those things. But the major categories are these, and we have to focus on these categories more than these categories. The reason being, the templates that we generate for painting are by and large applicable for sculpture as well. When you go for subject matter analysis, it is not that they are just applicable. The reason is that they are intended to be applicable. Visual arts as such collectively makes similar kind of impact on our mind. एक subject होता है aesthetics नाम का. People study that a lot. It's a full-fledged field of discipline. We don't get to study, but when we study aesthetics, especially Indian aesthetics, we come to know that some aesthetics are common for all the visual arts. वहीं से आपके points बनते हैं. Some aesthetics are common for all the performing arts. वहीं से आपके points बनते हैं. So we'll focus more on these categories to generate points, which will be applicable to every art form. But ठीक है, मैं थोड़ा आगे की बात बोल दिया. Come back. We have main 4 only categories. So what I have done is categorize them into those 4. Apart from that, sometimes a question could be on specific dynasty, contribution of dynasty, specific era, or specific patron, a specific king maybe. So those questions I have talked pattern specific questions. And if you see all these art forms, you come to know that the most asked art form is visual arts. More than 50% questions so far have come only and only from visual arts. Those questions are also little tricky. If you go within them, you will come to know there are a variety of typologies of questions. तो मैंने उनको भी यहाँ पे divide किया है only in the case of visual arts. I will discuss what these terms mean. Why this analysis is important? Because it gives you ready-made points to write in the answer. So उसका मैंने एक simple सा table बनाया हुआ है. एकदम basic to give you idea. Look at the questions. Ancient is much more important than medieval if you go by simple distribution. If at all, past is a guide to present and future. Then if you go by art form, most of the questions have come from visual arts. Right? More than half the questions. And then you go to visual arts, you see there are some questions which are I called as interpretative. यहाँ पे आपकी गाड़ी रुक जाती है. I have seen hundreds of answers so far. What I come to know is that you expect that the prelims knowledge is as it is applicable to mains to write in the answer. और आपको आंसर लिखने नहीं आ रहा है तो आप सोचते हो कि यार मेरे पास डेटा कम था. I lacked revision, I lacked points, so I could not write answer. That is completely untrue in most of the cases. For 2 reasons. Reason 1, maybe you have the points, you are not able to put them. And maybe even if you don't have the points, you can write the answer, but you don't know how. Because of these 2 reasons. So देखो questions जो होते हैं prelims वाले कि मैंने चोला एम्पायर पढ़ लिया, गुप्ता एरा पढ़ लिया, मुगल एम्पायर पढ़ लिया. I have read features of art forms of every kind of dynasty and region. रट लिया है पूरा. And I have to write the answer. Those direct, write the features, salient aspects, contribution of something XYZ. These questions, require you to go for a description of the art form. So we call them descriptive answers or descriptive questions. They are only 3 of the 12, 25%. Some of them are evolutionary. It means you have to go and trace the evolution of that art form over various dynasties and eras. But such questions have also been very less, and they are implied more than explicit. They are implied sometimes. But the most important category of questions is interpretative. You are less worried about the art form and more worried about what that tells you. देखो दो चीजें होती है. You have, let us take an example. You have one black box, that is your art. Some kind of painting or sculpture maybe, or a temple. Now here is the input. Who created the art and why? It could be a Raja, a patron, a king, or a merchant community, a guild, or some caste community, or common people. It could be anybody. So you have a patron. The patron is influenced by certain ideas. It could be bhakti, religion, or it could be anything. Let us take religion or ideas. And the art form has its own features. If it is a sculpture, it may have raw material, it may have a style of presentation, it may have some story being narrated. All the things are there. It is in some location, it is in some time span. And then it also has some intended audience. किसके लिए बनाया है? But आज के दिन में आप यहाँ पे खड़े हो, आपको पूछा जा रहा है कि this art form, how do you see it today and analyze in order to gain information about the era, about the society of that era, about the polity of the era. तो इसमें चोड़ा के फीचर्स जो है कि भाई पिलर छोटा है, मूर्ति सुंदर है, स्कल्पचर में मटेरियल ये यूज किया हुआ है और विमान का स्ट्रक्चर ये होता है, वो आपको कुछ काम नहीं आने वाला, पूछा ही नहीं है. Not asked. The question is, let us say Chola only, कि Chola sculpture देख के, what can you tell me about the Chola era society and culture? In it, I don't need to read the description of Nataraja Murti. वो मेरे काम का ही नहीं है. So descriptive question तो है ही नहीं. A question could be how this religion or these ideas are shaping the art form. Even in that, I don't need to specifically talk about the details of the art form, but I need to only find a few details, 2-4 point लेके connect them with some motive. That is, so such kind of questions where you either go backward or forward, art form becomes a means for you to talk about something else. So you go for interpretation. तो यहाँ पे आपने जो गुप्ता चोड़ा पढ़ा होगा और फीचर्स याद किए होंगे, they will not help you because that is not even the question, right? So we have to use the same features now. I will not teach you separately कोई किताब पढ़ो, notes पढ़ो, कोई जरूरत नहीं है. Same features, but you need to contextualize them, interpret them. वो कैसे करें, ये हमारा पर्पस होगा. If you do that only, जो 2.4 क्वेश्चन पूछे जाने वाले हैं उसमें से आपका 1.4 तो यहीं पे हो जाएगा क्योंकि क्वेश्चन तो ही आते हैं स्टैटिस्टिकली, ठीक है. But even it might sound like some kind of theory to you. What I will do now for next few minutes is to walk you through some model answers, which are actually not so model answers. These are the answers submitted to me by various students over last 10 days who are appearing for mains this year, and they have practiced answer writing a lot in the past 1 or 2 or 3 years. तो हम एक एक सवाल और आंसर यहाँ पे पब्लिकली पढ़ेंगे, एंड देन आई विल आस्क यू टू टेल मी कि क्या वो आंसर सही है, अगर है तो क्यों, अगर नहीं है तो क्या गलत है या इंप्रूव करना चाहिए था. We'll do that for 10 answers one by one consecutively. Once you go through the 10 answers, you'll understand कि what should be the lens you should have to look at the question and how do you create answer. Answers बुरे नहीं हैं, they are decent answers, but still some of them have fatal flaws. ठीक है, let us do that exercise for some time, half an hour or so. The first question: analyze the vibrant cultural activities in peninsular India during 550 to 750 CE. That is the post-Gupta centuries. कि गुप्ता एम्पायर खत्म हो गया है एंड अर्ली मिडिवल शुरू होना है, उसका जो बीच वाला ट्रांजिशन फेज है उसकी बात चल रही है. Compare and contrast it with the situation in the contemporary North India. Simple question. आप आंख बंद करो, आपको याद क्या आएगा पहले कि there was Harsha in North India, there was Chalukya of Badami in Deccan and Pallavas in South. So these are the centuries of Harsha, Chalukya, Pallava. यही तो पूछा है. अब आंसर देख लेते हैं. The post-Gupta period of 550 to 750 CE saw fragmentation of North India into multiple kingdoms and establishment of two important kingdoms of Pallava and Chalukya in peninsular India. It is a good kind of introduction where you have given time and space and overall picture and a rationale which has bearing on culture. Right? Then, vibrant cultural activities in peninsular India. Pallavas, pioneers of Dravidian art and architecture, first stone and mortar temples in peninsular India, architecture in 3 stages. Rock cut temples, some examples, monolithic rathas, some examples and features, structural temples, some examples and features. तो ये तो प्री का सारा डिस्क्रिप्टिव आंसर हो गया. Then you go for next part. Pallavas developed the port city of Mamallapuram and cultural hub. There was royal patronage of multiple religions and rise of Vaishnavism and Shaivism. Fine arts and literature flourished. You have some examples. So you have done Pallavas very well. You have covered some dimensions as well. Then Chalukya's contribution. Presence of rock-cut cave temples and structural temples at Aihole, Badami, etc. Development of Vesara style of architecture. Then some temples examples are given by names. And then Bhakti movement, Alvar and Nainar saints propagated Vaishnavism and Shaivism respectively and reached out to masses in regional language, songs and hymns. Rise of Bhakti literature, Devaram, Divya Prabandham. And then situation in North India, fragmented polity did not see much cultural activity. Still some major activities, Harsha, Nalanda University, spread of Nagara style and spread of Tantricism. So what all one can imagine to be remembered, वो लिख दिया सारा. Now tell me, इतना भी लिखो तो भी आपको 10 में से 4 मिलने वाले हैं, no doubt. This answer is actually average, above average answer, you get 10 out of 4. But can you see some flaw in the answer? Yes. Correct. That is one thing. When they are asking compare and contrast, it means you have to take some dimensions and then compare them. North में क्या, South में क्या. That is true technically. But if you start doing this, then maybe we on the spot, in those 7 to 10 minutes, we might not be able to come with similar comparative points of North and South. और फंस जाती है गाड़ी. ये वो आसान काम होता नहीं है 10 मिनट में करना. तो फिर you ultimately end up going not for tabular comparison, but sectional parts, which is okay. But you're right. Anything else? Conclusion is fine. You need to have some conclusion. Have they written it? There is no conclusion. You can add some conclusion. Yes, that will give completion. But I am saying fatal issue. By fatal, I mean actually, देखो जब question पूछा जाता है ना, you are not supposed to, even if the question is descriptive, which is like this, you are not supposed to give only what, you are also supposed to give why. Now, why should be given some basic importance and connect that why with what. For example, North में यहाँ पे mention किया है कि there is political fragmentation and that has impact on culture. South में you have emergence of strong regional states who go for consolidation of power and that is why you have patronage. तो दोनों points लिखे हैं, they connect नहीं किए गए. That doesn't require any fact. But if you don't connect why with the what, the answer का internal linkage थोड़ा weak हो जाता है. That is one point. And secondly and more importantly, changes have direction. Strong polity and changing religion. Now religion has set of beliefs, set of gods, set of rituals. And to serve those beliefs and gods and rituals, you create art. In India, there is generally only and only in pre-modern era, religious art. There is no secular art that you can very easily find in the pre-modern times. If it is there, it is not in our syllabus. तो उसको भूल जाते हैं. तो अगर आपको art की बात करनी है, तो you first talk of religion. You talk about religion कैसे change हो रही है, and that has impact on art. यहाँ पे सीक्वेंस हो गया उल्टा, टेम्पल्स की बात पहले होती है और अलवर नियर की बात बाद में होती है. So I talk of religious change and political causes first, and then तो facts तो यही रहेंगे. Facts will remain the same. There is no change in facts, but the way I need to present them is in a causal way. And for that causal way, I need to talk of political structure, religious changes, and then connect that to cultural changes. That makes good comparison, and that makes simple analysis. By the way, question अच्छा लिखा है, आंसर कोई दिक्कत नहीं है. I am just बाल की खाल निकाल रहा हूँ यहाँ पे थोड़ा सा, to give you some idea why culture questions need to improve. But you will see some questions require much. आपको गर्मी हो रही है क्या यहाँ पे? ठीक है, थोड़ी देर में बोल देते किसी को. Look at the second question. Who were Pallavas and review their contribution to the art and culture? A simple descriptive question. Pallavas कौन है? Contribution to art and culture. So what I would write? Pallavas were feudatories of Satavahanas originally, who ruled from their capital Kanchipuram from 3rd to 9th century CE and peaking at the 7th century. आपने time and space बता दिया, origin बता दिया, and then you talk about capital also. A good, small, tiny introduction. Then they had enigmatic contribution. Now I think the person doesn't come from the normal English background, तो adjective गलत लिख दिया, but कोई बात नहीं. They have some important contribution to the field of art and architecture. So example, Dravidian art and architecture. Pallavas represent the early stage of Dravidian art and architecture, which blossomed to the full extent under Chola dynasty. ठीक है. The first stone and mortar temples of South India were constructed during Pallava rule. Architecture saw transition in 3 stages: rock cut to monolithic, monolithic to structural. We know all these things, very basic. Rock cut temples के example दे दिए, Mahendravarman etc. Then you have some examples of monolithic rathas given over there, and then structural temples के example दे दिए. So you have 3-stage evolution of architecture, and you have examples and contributions. Then fine arts and literature, we have Kudumalai or Kudumiyammalai musical inscription, Mahendravarman Sanskrit work Matta Vilasa Prahasana, and Sanskrit scholar Dandin at court of Raja Simha. और फिर ये आंसर खत्म हो जाता है. So what is the fault in this answer? Facts are all right, and fact के बाद we are not fighting at the level of facts. I am presuming that some facts you also know because you have cleared prelims now. हो सकता है इसमें से आधे facts याद हो, कोई दिक्कत नहीं है. It's fine, that would do. But when you write an answer, आपको इस आंसर में क्या इशू लग रहा है? कुछ लग रहा है, इशू नहीं लग रहा? Yes. Okay. Like पेंटिंग ऐड कर सकते थे, करेक्ट, right? So you're right. The point is, the question that is asked over here is about overall contribution to art and culture, but the major focus, the 90% focus of the answer is only and only on architecture. So एक ये हो गया disproportionate answer. Architecture is no doubt seminally important. It is the beginning of the Dravidian school, Dravidian style. तो उसका contribution बहुत important है. So maybe I write in 1 page, but writing almost 1.8 pages only for architecture does not make sense to me, and giving only 3 to 4 points for literature. Or rather, I should go for diversity of points. Now, in culture or overall in history, understand there is an argument, there is an evidence. हम जो facts की बात करते हैं, those are evidences. Just writing 10-20 evidences which support the same argument is not enough. If you want to talk about architecture, दो example दे दिए, चलो आगे. Just proving the same point again and again and again and again by telling, देखो मुझे इतने सारे evidences याद है, that will not fetch me marks. My primary idea is to have diversity of arguments, diversity of dimensions, and for each dimension, even if I'm able to give one example, one fact, good enough. आगे चलो, right? So यहाँ पे issue वो हो गया कि there is only architecture, architecture, architecture. Rather, इसको कम करके I could have added painting, I could have added sculpture, I could have given some kind of better idea of literature. तो question थोड़ा well-rounded होता. So why does this happen? Because we have our bias. हम सोच के गए पल्लवा माने आर्किटेक्चर माने द्रविडियन फाउंडेशन लिख के आ जाओ. तो डिमांड ऑफ द क्वेश्चन हम सेटिस्फाई कर ही नहीं उसको. So even though the student remembers everything, all the correct facts and arrange them in a good manner, this answer will not fetch good marks. The primary reason is we have not answered the question. आपको सारा लिखना है, अपने एक के ऊपर फोकस कर दिया, जिम में जाके बस चेस्ट मार के आ गए, है ना? तो that is one thing. And second thing about it is again what and why. There is what given everywhere, but there is no why. Why did Pallavas require to give so much patronage? Why is Pallava state a cultural state? इसका जो आंसर होता है सिंपल होता है, and that will be applicable to Maurya also, Gupta also, Chola also. देखेंगे हम धीरे धीरे. But we have to somewhere add why. ठीक है? Let's look at the next question. Discuss the relevance of indigenous literature in reconstruction of history of India or ancient history. Indigenous literature is reconstruction of ancient history. आप पढ़ पा रहे हैं ना? Is it visible? Okay. So Indian literature and folklore are precious assets of the country. Since ancient times, writing has reflected the culture, lifestyle, socio-political conditions, etc., which helps in the reconstruction of history. Simple, it's a good restatement in a good fashion, and you have also talked about the reason कि इसका reflect सारा होता है, तो इसका usefulness है. It's a good introduction. Then you go for relevance. There you talk about Vedic period में Rigved, Samaved, Yajurved, Atharvaved, and you get to know what all you come to know. For example, in Samaved, origin of Indian music. In Rigved, provides information on early Indo-Aryans, etc. Then you go for Brahmanical literature. You have Vedangas, Kalpasutras. Buddhist literature, you have Tripitakas, 𝗵𝗶 Mahavamsha, Aryanization. What is Arya? Manjushri Mulakalpa. Jain literature, you have Parishishta Parvan, you have Kautilya Arthashastra, Sangam age literature, etc. Then you go to Gupta period, you have again, this is the wrong example. Pandani's Ashtadhyayi does not come from Gupta era, it comes from earlier era. But anyway, Patanjali's Mahabhashya also comes from earlier era. You have some other examples, Aryabhatta, etc. Then you go to post-Gupta period, you go to Kashmir history, Raja Tarangini by Kallana. And then ancient Indian literature is a significant part of Indian cultural heritage, which enables us to know more about social, cultural, economic and political aspects of history. So this is all the eras covered. What do you think is the problem with this answer? Madam. Question was about? Okay, literature only. It was specifically literature only, not entire art form. Okay. Discuss the relevance of indigenous literature in reconstruction of ancient history. It's about literature only. So it is done here to some extent that Rigveda talks about the provides information on early Indo-Aryan. Samaveda, origin of Indian music. You are right. You are correct in a way. कि question पूछा है कि how do you reconstruct history, and not only that, it is asking discuss the relevance. तो यहाँ पे क्या हुआ? Yes, that point is required, but there is only one point, but it should come because the term that they use is indigenous. So you have to say कि भाई indigenous literature is XYZ examples and they have certain advantages, but they also have certain limitations, right? So देखो हर क्वेश्चन में ना एक सब्जेक्ट होता है, एक ऑब्जेक्ट होता है. फॉर एग्जाम्पल इन दिस क्वेश्चन यू हैव इंडियन लिटरेचर इज वन पार्ट एंड हिस्ट्री रिकंस्ट्रक्शन इज अदर पार्ट. दो चीजें हैं. यू हैव इंडिजिनियस लिटरेचर गोइंग टू reconstruction of history. Simple. If I ask you another question, for example, which was asked last year only, कि how does the medieval temple sculpture help us to understand society? Right. So you have medieval temple sculpture asked for UPSC last year only. To understand contemporary society. Now ये दोनों questions का देखो, एक चीज है जो आपका object है, एक है subject. Now you have two ways of talking about this answer. You can either take the first part and deconstruct it. Dimensions उसके आ जाएंगे, जैसे इस आंसर में किया है, Vedic literature, Gupta literature, Buddhist literature, etc. And then within that, you can talk about which part of history you get to know, which is done in the answer. Or there is other way around, that I take history as the main thing and deconstruct history, social, political, economic, etc. And for that I pick up one example from any era. Now which template here is more suitable according to you in this question? The second one, because question is discuss the relevance. So I can take dimension political, for example, and in say political, I get to know few things. For example, 1-2 Kautilya says this or something, but I don't get to say other things because of limitations. I go to economic again, social again, cultural again. Within that I can talk about relevance. क्या पता चल सकता है और क्या पता नहीं चल सकता है. जब तक वो second half नहीं आता है कि what you cannot know और limitations of the literature or limitations of indigenous literature, तब तक आपका आंसर complete नहीं है. So in this, two things are amiss. Firstly, the better way is to deconstruct this part than this part in this question. And secondly, when you say discuss the relevance, it actually translates as to what extent they are useful. It also means to what extent they are not useful. The second half is completely missing. तो हमें लगता है हम तो पूरा रट के बढ़िया से आंसर लिख के आ गए वहां पे, आपने क्वेश्चन पूरा लिखा ही नहीं. Look at this question also. Medieval temple that can tell us about society. So in this also, I can either deconstruct this part or deconstruct this part. If I deconstruct this part, I can talk about Nagara sculpture. I can talk about the examples from Chola region. I can talk about examples from Pallava, from Pattadkal, from Kalinga, from Gujarat, and then I talk about kya pata chalta hai. It will be difficult and also illogical to some extent. The better way is to deconstruct society. What do I know about caste, about gender, about inequality, about festivals, about language, about education, and then I just find some example of some sculpture from anywhere in India. अगर याद आता है तो काम हो गया मेरा. Right? So you have to consciously decide when you have such kind of poles in the answer whether to deconstruct this or this based on the requirement of the question. ठीक है? Let us go for next question. I hope this is illuminating to you. When you look at the questions, we will do ample amount of answering practice in the class. हम बहुत आंसर हर दिन लिखेंगे, but I just want to get this done once so that you get an idea how to think about the questions. Let us go to the next question. See, my whole point is that you have to understand that even if you do not recall all the facts, even if you do not recall all the important facts, it is completely fine, no problem. Because ultimately the questions are more of interpretative in nature. It requires analysis and perspective. उसके लिए आपको dimensions खोलने हैं, काम हो जाता है आपका. 2-4 facts से काम हो जाता है. In some questions they are specifically descriptive. Only there you need to worry about facts. But वो questions कम आते हैं. ठीक है? So assess the importance of the account of Chinese and Arab travelers in the reconstruction of history of India. Assess the importance of Chinese and Arab travelers. So ये वो था indigenous literature. This one is foreign literature. The life in India in Gupta age and post-Gupta age was too prosperous. India at that time was socially, politically, and economically acted as a fascination for many travelers from Arab region and Chinese. So the attempt is थोड़ा grammar गड़बड़ हो गया इसका, but it is a good attempt. What he is trying to tell is that there was something pulling all these foreigners to come to India, and because they were pulled with some kind of attraction, they had to write about it. And because it was such an attractive era, we get to know about that era from these people. So it was an okay attempt of writing introduction. Then importance of accounts of Chinese travelers. You have फ़ाहियान and some regions of फ़ाहियान. You talk about his travel account 𝗪𝗪. He mentioned about Buddhism, its monks, pilgrimage practices, etc. He talked about Chandalas, untouchables, Kaudis, criminals, etc. He mentioned that in general people were happy and he did not drink, they did not drink intoxicating drinks or consume onion and garlic. 𝗂𝗏 travel accounts name. He also talked about Buddhism, pilgrimage practices, monks, mentioned about social life and caste system. He glorified Harsha, the king, and paid tribute to him. Then you have 𝗖𝗃. He talked about Buddhist philosophy and Nalanda University. Importance of account of Arab travelers. You have Suleiman, Al-Masudi, then Abu Ishaq Ali, and the most important one is Al-Biruni, and some facts of each of them. Finally, both Arab and Chinese travelers provided important information related to social, political, economical, and religious life of that period. This shows that Indian culture was composite, consistent, and dynamic in nature. तो कुछ कोशिश करिए कंक्लूड करने की, इतना ठीक से बात बनी नहीं. But what is the issue with this answer? थोड़ा सा सोचने की कोशिश करो. This you might get little bit intimidated by the fact कि इतने सारा याद कैसे आएगा. याद आ जाता है, don't worry. आधा याद आए तो भी कोई इशू नहीं है. We are not worried about facts. Facts का लेवल का गेम आपने ऑलरेडी जीत लिया है by clearing prelims. Just एक बार उसको रिवाइज कर लो कि आपका काम हो जाएगा. The question, the main struggle is at the next level. How to convert that into a good answer. For that, the basic thing is how to interpret question and understand demand of the question. तो यहाँ पे जो आंसर है इसमें क्या limitations? But question is about Chinese and Arab only. Question specifically asking उनके बारे में ही बताइए. Correct. So although Faiyan, 𝗂𝗏 give lot of rosy picture, but Al-Biruni does not give rosy picture at all. He actually gives lot of criticism also. So assess the importance of the accounts. तो importance क्या है? I come to the society, polity, economy. ये importance है. Well, that is true. But apart from that, I need to have to talk about dimensions here. For example, a foreigner coming to India and writing about it. Matlab, you have cross-cultural view. One thing. Secondly, do you have any diary of any Indian of 5th and 6th century available to you? We don't. We don't have a history book also of that era. So these are the only contemporary eyewitness sources which are describing Indian features. So contemporary eyewitnesses with the express idea कि मैं describe करूं, and not only objective description, it is rather subjective. It comes from their own lens, of their own culture, of their own background. And then thirdly, they focus on something which attracts them more. बुद्धिज्म के लिए आए तो उसकी बात करेंगे. तो this is the importance. Sometimes you can also add about कि compared to Indian literature जो आप बोल रहे थे, इसमें कुछ अलग facets उजागर होते हैं जो Indian literature में नहीं हो पाते. Right? So these are fake. For example, गुप्ता एरा में जब फाहियान आता है, what do you have in India? कालिदास, we have भर्तृहरि, we have आर्यभट्ट, वराहमिहिर, we have Kama Sutra of Vatsyayana. Now these people give us some idea, but not the eyewitness account कि समाज में चल क्या रहा है. What we have indigenously is either literature which is creative literature, drama, poetry, dance literature, या normative literature, कानून कैसे होना चाहिए. So creative and normative, both of them are ahistoric. They don't tell me, they don't describe society as they see. So the only source is foreign literature. So when I compare and contrast, I come to know lots of things. So I have got some assessment of the importance of the foreign accounts. On the other hand, when we assess, we have to talk about limitations also. That their intended audience is their king or their people there. उनको जो मन लुभावन लगे वो लिखा हुआ है. Maybe they did not understand everything. Maybe they did not see everything themselves. जो कहीं सुनी बातें भी लिख दी. Maybe they exaggerated some, क्योंकि फाहियान 𝗂𝗏 इंडिया आए थे क्योंकि उनको चाइना में बुद्धिज्म फैलाना था. तो वहां पे उन्हें बहुत ग्लोरीफाई करके दिखाया, लेकिन इंटेंशन तो कुछ अलग था. फाहियान डज नॉट मेंशन पॉलिटिक्स एट ऑल. 𝗂𝗏 तो वो हर्षा उसको पैसे दे रहा है और पैसे दे रहा है, उसकी तो बड़ाई करेगा. सीधी बात है, पैट्रोनेज, इट कम्स विद बायस. तो दिस इज द एनालिसिस, दिस इज कंप्लीटली मिसिंग। आपके मन में ये था इसमें कि पॉलिटिकल सोशल इकोनॉमिक लिखूं, आई नो ऑल द क्रोनोलॉजिकल फैक्ट्स कि भाई गुप्ता में कौन, पोस्ट गुप्ता में कौन, अर्ली मेडिवल कौन, नाम लिखूं, इससे आंसर नहीं बनता। अगर इसके इफ द स्टूडेंट हैड रिटन हाफ द फैक्ट्स and added such kind of analysis, I would have given more numbers. So don't obsess with the facts. You already have enough facts. Can we mention that as Nalanda was destroyed, we lots of literature can be compensated to some extent by this. Samaksh, you can talk about that, but Nalanda destruction is not the only point, because we don't know what kind of books were there, whether they're philosophical or all other kinds. They may come from diverse backgrounds, but what we can say for sure is that we have limitations to which we can gather data from Indian sources. So additional viewpoint is welcome. ठीक है? So you got the idea. Question को interpret कैसे करना है? Let us go to one more. ये कितना एग्जाम्पल नंबर 4 था, अभी तुम्हें बहुत जाना है। ठीक है। So whenever you write history answers or culture answers, do not worry that you can't memorize all the facts. उसकी जरूरत भी नहीं होती। Early Buddhist stupa art, while depicting folk motives and narratives, successfully expounds Buddhist ideals. Discuss. UPSC पूछा था क्वेश्चन, it was googly for many people. It is come from directly NCERT. Themes में से डायरेक्ट सवाल पूछा है। Look at this answer. Let me read the question again. Early Buddhist stupa art, while depicting folk motives and narratives, successfully expounds Buddhist ideals. Discuss. Though stupa architecture construction started during the post-Vedic period, it reached its climax during Mauryan period, during Ashoka's reign. Now, this line itself is factually incorrect. स्तूपा का पीक मौर्य में आया ही नहीं था, तो पोस्ट मौर्य में आया। Mauryan stupas are very simple, very rudimentary, and very boring. They are important historically and functionally, but architecturally they are not marvelous. And none of them actually survives as they were in that era, क्योंकि बाद में उनको improve किया गया। What we see today as beautified stupa with 𝗪𝗏, यष्टि, वेदिका, everything, तोरणा, etc., that comes from post-Mauryan era, जो कि peak है, not Mauryan era. But anyway, let us ठीक। He constructed remarkable number of stupas, prominent being Sarnath, Sanchi, Takshashila, etc. These stupas depict Buddhist ideas in many ways, and then typically we are taught to draw a diagram of Sanchi stupa. Right? हमको डायग्राम बनाना आती है, तुरंत छोटी सी है, बना देंगे। यहाँ पे you can show all the elements. पहली बात तो आएगा pillars do not come in Sanchi stupa, they come in South India. Then you don't have Chhatri, Yashti, 𝗪𝗏, Pradakshinapath, Medhi, and Torana at all in Mauryan era. All these elements are added in the post-Mauryan era. In the Mauryan era, what we have is just Medhi and Anda. That's all. You should know कि chronologically आप गलती ना करें. This is a representative stupa of the post-Mauryan era. Line लिखी आपने Mauryan era के ऊपर. Anyway, let's forget that. Come to next point. Engravings on Toranas and Vedikas which depicts Buddhist ideals. It is a good point. कि engraving है कहाँ पे? Vedika and Torana पे. Vedika मतलब fence, Toran मतलब दरवाजा, gateway. So Yaksha and Yakshini represent how Buddhism and local tradition flourish together. Buddha and its Jataka stories showcase life of Buddha to be followed by devotees. Horse, lion, bull, elephant depicts important events of Buddha's life from birth to Mahaparinirvana. Scenes of processions depict discipline and other things. Other folk motifs, peacock, people, mango trees, etc. So stupa architecture was used to keep the relics of Buddha and Buddhist monks. These later became the symbol of Buddhist ideology and philosophy. Now, इसमें क्या गड़बड़ है? ऊपर देखते देखते लगता है आंसर बढ़िया लिखा है। फर्स्ट पेज आई हैव ऑलरेडी टॉक्ड अबाउट क्यों गड़बड़ है, फर्स्ट पेज को भूल जाते हैं। सेकंड पेज इज मोर रिलेवेंट टू द आंसर। इसमें क्या गड़बड़? लुक एट द क्वेश्चन अगेन। यस, बट नॉट ओनली दैट, उसके पहले एक बात है, डिपिक्टिंग फोक मोटिव्स एंड नरेटिव्स सक्सेसफुली एक्सपाउंड बुद्धिस्ट आइडियाज। मतलब ये है कि देयर आर सम बुद्धिस्ट आइडियाज which were propagated through folk narratives or folk symbols. अब folk symbol मतलब क्या? लोगों के। So there are certain symbols, there are certain motifs, some stories which are actually not Buddhist originally. वो समाज के अलग अलग हिस्सों में लोगों में कहानी या सिंबल्स, लोकल डेइटीज, लोकल गॉड्स चल रहे हैं। Now Buddhism reaches there, it wants to spread itself, it wants to convert people to Buddhism, popularize its own ideas. अब कैसे करें? तो जो लोगों को ऑलरेडी पॉपुलर है उसी को उठाओ, उसके मीनिंग को चेंज करो. Right? For example, Buddhism started in UP and Bihar, but when it reaches Madhya Pradesh, when it goes to Gandhar, when it goes to Andhra Pradesh, तो वहां पे it will not work the way it worked in UP and Bihar. You have to change the message. You have to change the format of the message. तो वहां का जो प्री एग्जिस्टिंग फोक कल्चर है उसको हमने आपका भगवान गलत, हमारा भगवान सही, भगवान आपका हटा दो, मेरा स्तूपा बना दो, ये बात नहीं है. जिस देवता की आप पूजा करते हो उसी को हम लेके आएंगे अपने मंदिर के अंदर, कहेंगे देखो आपकी देवता हमारे साथ ही है, तो आप भी हमारे साथ आ जाओ. Assimilation of local traditions. So if you have socio-anthropological background, you know कि there is great tradition and little tradition. So ये little tradition का assimilation तो है. So unless and until you mention this process of spread of Buddhism, which assimilated local cultures and then reoriented the meanings to propagate its own ideals, this is nothing but a restatement of the same question. But यही तो question है. And then you take some motives and talk about पहले उसका मतलब क्या था, अब उसका मतलब क्या change हो गया. If you don't tell how the meaning is changed or how a same symbol has multiple meanings, some Buddhist and some non-Buddhist, तो आपका आंसर कंप्लीट होगा ही नहीं. For example, take Yaksha Yakshini, the first one only that this person, Yaksha and Yakshini. Who are Yaksha Yakshini? Yakshas is not one god, it's a category of various popular deities. It could be Manibhadra, it could be Kuber, it could be anything. All these local deities worshipped by local people in cities and villages. They are collectively known as Yaksha. अब ये कोई, they are not part of Hinduism, they are not part of Buddhism, they are not part of any religion. They are no folk religion. But when Buddhism reaches there, it absorbs this cult into itself और स्तूपा के बाहर रहेगा मूर्ति ऑफ यक्षिणी. सांची की जो ये है शाला भंजी का यक्षिणी. What does it say कि आसपास में कोई ट्राइबल होगा, कोई विदिशा का शहरवासी हो, नगरवासी होगा, he will go to स्तूपा से, अच्छा तो मेरा ही भगवान है, मैं इसको जानता हूँ, तो let me be curious, let me get involved in the process. Right? So you have to talk about that, ki how these folk motives and symbols and deities and ideas were picked up and reoriented, उसके अंदर बुद्धिस्ट मैसेज को लगा दिया. तो interaction of great and little, spread of Buddhism, and then change in the meaning of the symbol. That is the question. बस क्वेश्चन को पढ़ना आना चाहिए. आपको सिंबल कौन सा भी याद है, स्वस्तिक आए, पीपल आए, लक्ष्मी आए, हाथी आए, घोड़ा आए, कोई फर्क नहीं पड़ता. 2-3 लिखने काम हो जाता है. आइडिया क्या, डू यू अंडरस्टैंड दिस सोशल प्रोसेस दैट इज ऑनगोइंग. तो व्हेन अ क्वेश्चन इज आस्क्ड ऑन द डिस्क्रिप्शन ऑफ स्तूपा आर्ट, यू राइट अबाउट दिस प्रोसेशन भी है, राइट अबाउट जातका भी है. द फर्स्ट जातका एवर इज फाउंड इन सांची स्तूपा नंबर 2 फॉर द कुशल मानव जातक. ठीक है, हो गया डिस्क्रिप्शन. बट उसमें इट इज नॉट देयर. द क्वेश्चन इज अबाउट इंटरप्रिटेशन. तो यू हैव टू गो टू दैट लेवल. ठीक है. Other embellishments are already there. You can draw a map of India, you can draw some stupa, it is fine. But these are additional brownie points. They don't come at the cost of the fundamental answer. Let us look at this question. The rock cut architecture represents one of the most important sources of knowledge of early art and history. The rock cut architecture represents one of the most important source of knowledge of early art and history. Discuss. Again, you go to same idea. यही बात चल रही है इसमें भी. You have now rock cut art and early Indian art and history. Again, subject object. Now you have choice. इसको तोड़े या इसको तोड़े, दोनों साथ में मत तोड़ना, दिक्कत हो जाएगी, आंसर का स्ट्रक्चर बनेगा नहीं. Right? But anyway, rock cut architecture includes rock cut caves and rock cut monolithic, which provide knowledge about the ancient and early medieval period. So types of the architecture bata diya. It is okay. Why rock cut architecture is important source of knowledge? Preservation. Rock cut architecture is easy to preserve compared to other forms of art like sculpture, painting, inscription, etc. For example, the holy elephant in Odisha. Now This point is in a way okay. Rock cut architecture is more long lasting and therefore it is more available to us today. So therefore they become important compared to other art forms which are washed away in time. It is a fine point, okay. But the example given, the holy elephant in Odisha, it's a rock cut sculpture. It is rock cut architecture nahi hai. The holy elephant by Ashoka in Odisha, the holy rock के ऊपर हाथी बनाया, बढ़िया सुंदर है, but it is not a rock cut architecture. It's a sculpture in the rock. So example गलत हो गया. Regional history, as rock cut architecture can't be moved from the place. They provide history of specific region and dynasty. तो जो वहीं पे है वहीं पे रहेगा. But this is an okay point again. Engineering achievement, it shows us how these magnificent structures were made during that period when no formal engineering was present. ठीक है, now you are going for actual analysis. It's a good thing. How rock cut architecture preserves historical knowledge. Age of Mauryas. Ashoka constructed Sudama cave, 𝗪𝗏 cave in Barabar hills in Bihar for Ajivika's sect. These caves were simple with no pillars and single story structure. Post-Mauryan age, you have western region and eastern region, Karle, Bhaza and Kaneri on the western coast of India. In the eastern, you have Udaygiri and Kharavela, Chedi dynasty in Odisha. Then Gupta, Vakataka age, you have Udaygiri and Bagh, Ajanta caves. Post-Gupta, Badami, Ajanta, Mahabalipuram, early medieval Elephanta and Kailasnath temple, etc. Thus, rock cut architecture provides of information about social, political and religious situations of these periods. This could be useful to construct history of India. अब इसमें क्या गड़बड़ हो गई? Yes, question is interpretive, लिख दिया descriptive, है ना? तो question समझा ही नहीं. And giving all this data is useful sometimes, but all this data of 2 pages can be compressed in half a page by drawing a simple timeline. You just draw one line and show Mauryan era, post-Mauryan, Gupta, post-Gupta, give one example each. आपका काम हो गया timeline पे. Don't have to write 2 pages for this. If you don't want to do timeline, draw map of India. हल्का सा इंडिया का मैप दिखा देते आप. For example like this. आता नहीं तो कोई दिक्कत नहीं. You can draw at least this much. This is India for us. More than enough. इससे अपना काम हो जाता है. Draw something like this. Box. Then you show. यहाँ पे बराबर के, यहाँ पे कारला भाजा, यहाँ पे उदयगिरी खंडगिरी, यहाँ पे something, यहाँ पे something. Just write names. Easy to do. Or you can draw some timeline like this and then show everything on the timeline. Any of these two, don't do both. इतनी जगह नहीं है, जरूरत भी नहीं है. Any of these two would be okay. But the question is not about this. Question is about interpretation. जो आंसर में किया ही नहीं है. ठीक है. Three, 4 questions more. Gandhara sculpture owed as much to Romans as to the Greeks. Explain. So Gandhar school of sculpture flourished in the northwestern frontier region of India, now in Pakistan. It has Indo-Greek influence and thus known as Hellenistic art. It has both Romans as well as Greek influences and described as below. Greek influences 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 जो आपने फिल्म से पढ़े हुए features. Then you go for Roman influences 1, 2, 3, 4 जो आपको याद आए उस समय याद ना आए जैसे भी हो. And then Gandhar school of sculpture, though was patronized by Greeks, Shakas and Kushanas, it showed amalgamation of many features from Romans, Central Asians, Parthians, etc. Thus, it is a perfect blend of culture of Indian subcontinent, Europe and Central Asia. Now, इसमें क्या गड़बड़ हो गई? Why part is completely a mess. एक बात, और उसको आपको फ्रंट लोड करना है, ना कि बैक लोड भी करना है. फ्रंट लोड करना है. Why and then what? Secondly, I could have drawn the map of India again to show Gandhar region. That is one point. But यहाँ पे एक conceptual flaw भी है. मैं आपको जाते जाते बता दूं कि you have Greeks coming to India after Mauryans forming Indo-Greek Empire in the northwest. Then you have Shakas also, Parthians also, and Kushanas also. All of them bring various influences. Yes. But when we say Gandhar school, it may have some old elements, but formally for us, it begins from Kushan Empire and it ends with Kushan Empire. Pre-Kushan influences are there, but we do not call them Gandhar. समझ ठीक है, बट चलो कोई बात नहीं है, बहुत स्पेसिफिक चीज हो गई. While there are some common characteristics between Nagara and Dravida style of temple architecture, both have significant differences as well. Simple question, descriptive question. You see कि Dravidian style of temple architecture क्या लिखा emerged in southern India, whereas Nagara style flourished in northern India along with some variations in the eastern and western India. Common characteristics आपने लिखे गर्भगृह है, heavily enlarged sculpture, society, literature, central tower is present, mandapa is present, etc. तो आपने features लिख दिए यहाँ पे. But differences as well, and you make a small good table कि feature कौन सा है, Dravidian में क्या है, Nagara में क्या है, and draw a comparative table. So this is a good answer in a way. And then you conclude with, after giving lots of facts, कि the temple reflects the architecture of the specific region, but also serve as the tangible expression of unique identities and historical association with them. इसमें भी again, as expected, उसने लिखा descriptive answer सही लिखा है. One thing is missing again, why? What is 90%, 80% fine, but 10-20% why भी add होना चाहिए. Without that, the answer is incomplete. Why are there differences in the first place? Differences could be for many reasons. You have religious diversity. Rituals अलग अलग होते हैं, मंदिर बदल जाता है. Because मंदिर structure is supposed to subserve rituals. Rituals change होंगे, मंदिर change होगा, सीधी बात है. तो नमाज पढ़ते हैं तो नमाज के लिए कॉन्ग्रेगेशन का एरिया चाहिए, तो मॉस्क में से बनती है. पूजा होती है छोटे कुमारी भवन के साथ इकट्ठा 1-1-1, तो गर्भगृह छोटा होता है, सिंपल है. डांस होता है, नृत्य मंडप ऐड हो जाएगा. हवन होता है तो और कोई मंडप ऐड हो जाएगा. शादी होती है, कल्याण मंडप में ऐड हो जाएगा. सो रिचुअल्स क्रिएट द स्ट्रक्चर. तो रिलीजन्स शेप द आर्किटेक्चर. ये तो सिंपल है. बट so once you have ritual diversity, you have architectural diversity. There could be also differences due to local patronage. कि राजा की इच्छा, स्टाइल कैसे थी. More than that, the element of geography and climate is completely amiss. If you go to Bengal, for example, in Bengal, you have no stones, you have only मिट्टी. तो मंदिर कैसे बनेंगे, टेराकोटा के बनेंगे. If you go to Kashmir, तो वहां पे बर्फ पड़ती है, तो रूफ कैसे बनेगा उसका, जो यूजफुल होगा वहां पे. तो climatic, geographical, topographical elements, political patronage, and religious ritualistic diversity, all these things come together to have regional variations. एक लाइन बस ऐड करके काम हो जाता. But absence of that line makes the answer incomplete and also makes you excessively focus on facts. तो आपको डरा देता है कल्चर का क्वेश्चन. नहीं फोकस करना है. Facts are important, no doubt, but they are not whole and soul. ठीक है. Chola architecture represents a high water mark in the evolution of temple architecture. Discuss. Simple Chola के feature descriptive question है. Chola dynasty, which ruled over southern India during 9th and 11th century, is widely known for its marvelous temple architecture. They built चाहिए था hundreds of temples, but the prominents are Great Living Chola temples, which is also a UNESCO World Heritage Site in India. ठीक है. Then Chola Brudeshwara temple in Tanjavur, in Gangaikonda Chodapuram, in Darasuram, Airavateshwara temple. We have these 3 UNESCO temples. Then these temples are known for the artistic, engineering and cultural achievement. Good. Then special features, high gopurams. ये actually fact गलत है. Chola architecture is not known for high gopurams. It is the Pandyas who started the tradition. Cholas में विमान ही ऊंचे होते हैं. Gopurams ऊंचे हैं, but they are not the main feature. Vimanas are taller than that. But anyway, massive vimanas, एक आपने schematic बना दिया, विमान, गर्भगृह, गोपुरम का, etc. These stones used were interlocked with each other, giving inherent strength. Both interior and exterior were intricately carved. Other features like temple tank, huge मतलब पुष्करिणी, huge boundary walls, etc. Chola period represents the unique style of temple architecture and represents the grandeur life during the period. Correct. Main keyword is completely amiss. When you say high water mark, it means there is something called as low water mark. So the question inherently asking you, what are the features of Chola Empire in comparison to earlier Pallava? Pallava era में जो trend या style शुरू हुई थी, उसको ये कैसे आगे ले गए? Pallava sculpture, Chola sculpture. Pallava विमान, Chola विमान. Pallava style, Chola style. आपको comparatively evolution दिखाना है, तब वो आंसर पूरा बनेगा. When you say high water mark, मतलब evolutionary aspect. सो द क्वेश्चन, हो सकता है आपको पल्लवा पूरा याद ना आए, कोई दिक्कत नहीं है, कोई दिक्कत नहीं है, एटलीस्ट मेंशन इट इन वन लाइन इफ नॉट हाफ द आंसर, कि पल्लवों ने परंपरा शुरू की थी, चोलास took it to next level and refined it and perfected it. Even if you write that line in introduction, आपका काम हो जाए. But completely brushing aside Pallava and then telling Chola are high water mark is not going to be useful. ठीक है, तो क्वेश्चंस को रीड करना सीखना पड़ेगा आपको. Okay, one last question. Then we'll start our discussion. Vijayanagara architecture was borrowed boldly from various schools of architecture prevalent at that time and blended them superbly to make its own style of architecture comment. ठीक है, so different features came in Vijayanagara and they blended to make its own style. Vijayanagara architecture rose in 14th century mostly under 𝗪𝗏 𝗪𝗏, showcased the harmonious combination of Hindu and Islamic architecture along with convergence of Dravidian and Nagara style of temple. इसमें क्या गलती है? That is one. Yes, Nagara style is not generally present in Vijayanagara, correct. They combine actually Vesara and Dravida. Anything else? Simple chronology. कृष्णदेवराया कब आता है? 1520 का फेमस बैटल ऑफ रायचूर है, and he comes at, when is Vijayanagara empire over? By 1560s. It start in 1330s. तो विजयनगरा एम्पायर के जो पीक्स है, उस पीक में कृष्णदेवराया इज वन मेजर पीक, बट इट कम्स एट द फैग एंड. उसके पहले 150 साल एम्पायर चल रहा है, तब कुछ नहीं था क्या? सो व्हेन यू से विजयनगर आर्किटेक्चर रोज इन 14th century mostly under कृष्णदेवराया, कृष्णदेवराया was not in 14th century, and even before him you have already had multiple peaks like Devaraya 1, Devaraya 2, etc. ठीक है, so it tells me कि the person does not know the basic chronology of Vijayanagara architecture. Simple, but चलो ठीक है. Let us go to the main aspect. Characteristics of Vijayanagara architecture borrowed from prevalent schools. So you have hard stones that come from somewhere. You have granite and dark green chlorite, etc. Chalukyan style. You have Raya Gopurams built in wood, brick, and stucco taken from Cholas. Islamic architecture inspired decorated pillars, etc. And then example elephant stable. And original features of Vijayanagara Empire. You have some features, pillar kaise hai, Kalyan Mandapam kaise, etc. Now, the very basic idea here is when you read NCERT, you come to know that there are not one architecture of Vijayanagara, there are two Vijayanagara architectures. If you look at the map given, एक पूरा पेज भर के मैप दिया NCERT में कि there is in the city of Hampi two different segregated, purposefully segregated regions. एक है sacred zone जहाँ मंदिरें बने हुए हैं, एक है royal zone जहाँ पैलेस और बाकी चीजें बनी हुई है. And the styles in both the zones are different. In the sacred zone, you have temples, and temples are purely Dravidian, with the elements of Chalukyan, etc., but purely Hindu, so to say. But when you go to the royal zone, you have palaces, you have elephant stable, you have markets. There you see the mixture of Hindu and Muslim elements. You have Indo-Islamic elements coming into it. So we call it Islamicate architecture. So Vijayanagara has two styles. One is the next level improvement in Dravidian style. Only for the royal, वहाँ पे purposefully it was kept sacred and distinct. And then when you have secular architecture, palace and market, etc., जहाँ पे blending is allowed or rather encouraged also. यहाँ पे आपने वो segregation basic किया ही नहीं. You have mentioned कि you have Islamic architecture inspired the use of intricately decorated pillars. Actually, ये बात भी गलत है. Pillars are not coming from Islamic; they are coming from Chalukyan only. Rather, Hoysala, etc. Hoysala pillars are very well known. Lotus Palace does have arc, and arc is an indication of Islamic too, but that is not a temple; it's a palace. तो आपको segregation in the main features यहाँ पे mix up कर दिया पूरा. ठीक है. Other things are okay. So this is the basic idea that you don't need to read new things at all. डरो मत. What you need to work on is the analysis and interpretation. उससे आपका आधा काम हो जाएगा. बचा आधा काम आपने ऑलरेडी कर दिया है, आपने फैक्ट्स पढ़ लिए हैं प्रीलिम्स के लिए. जस्ट रिवाइज देम, दैट्स ऑल. इट डजंट मैटर वेदर यू रिमेंबर स्पेसिफिक फैक्ट और कोई भी फैक्ट चल जाती है कई जगह पे, ठीक है। एनी डाउट, एनी क्वेरी सो फार online? I hope you got a glimpse of what is expected of UPSC, expected of you by UPSC in architecture, art and architecture. Now let me give you some more idea. क्योंकि ये सब्जेक्ट हम नहीं पढ़ते हैं, तो I have to give you basic formula, not formula but some context, something called art history. This subject is not in our syllabus, but it is in itself a major subject of study, evolved over last 200 years, 250 years. It has got its own evolution, own phases, but some rudimentary understanding of that evolution helps us a lot to bracket the question in specific type or to create dimensions. Example देता हूँ. When did the modern art history study start in India? In British era, like any other part of history. If you are a British historian, then in the colonial era, you have specific purpose of writing Indian history, and that is to control India, to control the narrative, to show कि भाई हमारे बिना आप कुछ नहीं है, क्योंकि आप ऐसे भी कुछ नहीं थे. Anytime you had any great achievement, it came from outside. For example, Mauryan architecture. It is such a great, grand, marvelous architecture. आया कहाँ से? Persian influence, Achaemenid influence. बन गया question का context आपके. Good introduction. The colonial historians emphasized more on the foreign context. Example दूसरा, Gandhar style and Mathura style. So Gandhar and Mathura, both styles emerged simultaneously. Both are different styles, but अंग्रेज कहेगा Gandhar is better than Mathura. क्यों? क्योंकि Gandhar has features which are closer to Greek features, और जो उनको पसंद है. Anatomical accuracy is something that is understand as aesthetic beauty. But हम कहेंगे नहीं नहीं, मथुरा जो कि completely indigenous है, without any foreign mixture, Mathura is superior to Gandhar. That is what Indian historian would say. So when you have to write off features of Gandhar, Mathura, ये context है, right? Likewise, you go on throughout history, the contribution of Alexander, contribution of any other individual, Kushanas. So you have to talk about the foreign element. Secondly, they talk about the declining nature of art. ये खराब, वो गिर रहा है, वो गिर रहा है. No preservation. It is all completely otherworldly. It is too much religious, with no secular context, with no material context. Indians have been looking towards other world all the time. They are deeply seeped into philosophy. उनको बस दुनिया के राहदारी का कुछ पढ़ा ही नहीं है. तो because you are other world oriented, this world का काम कोई तो संभाले, चलो हम आते संभालते आपको, right? So British would say that, because so when you talk about any art, we do focus on religious angle, but we should also thereby focus on the engineering technological angle. अगर वो हम नहीं करते हैं, we just fall in trap of British narrative कि everything is otherworldly. But temple बनाना is a symbol, is a tangible expression of faith and devotion, yes, but it is also an engineering work. Rock cut temple are also engineering. जहाँ पे आप सह्याद्री में जाओ, अभी बरखा का मौसम है, मानसून सीजन है, you see कि पहाड़ में कितनी बारिश होती है, सीपेज होता है अंदर. If you are doing sitting inside rock cut cave and सब जगह से पानी का सीपेज हो रहा है, आप बैठ नहीं पाओगे, उमस हो जाएगी, बाहर निकल के आ जाओगे. You have to find a spot and do digging in such a way कि सीपेज ना हो. Does it not require some thinking, some understanding of architecture? It requires. So engineering context है, but British would emphasize only on the otherworldly aspect. So ये दो चीजें मैंने आपको जो बताई है, foreign element and categorizing Indians and otherworldly. So these two are important templates which can be used in different types of questions. So जहाँ जहाँ apply कर पाओ. But Indians started when this history was written. We have, I'm not saying कि British सारे नालायक ही थे. They have done immense amount of work also, no doubt. Like James Ferguson की मेरे पास इतनी मोटी किताब है, एडवर्ड बर्जेस, जेम्स फर्ग्यूसन, उसमें इंडियन आर्किटेक्चर के बारे में इतना बढ़िया कुछ लिखा है कि एक आदमी का काम है ही नहीं, कैसे किया पता नहीं. They have done immense amount of work. So foundation काम किया है, but they had some bias जिसके हम बात करें. But when they started to give that bias, Indians started to respond gradually. By 1890s, 1900, we started to write our own history. So you have nationalist history. When those scholars came, they retaliated British by talking about the greatness of Indian art, but they absorbed, they internalized certain aspects of British. So इसमें दो part आते हैं. You have देखो कितना सुंदर है, इसमें ये भी है, उसमें वो भी है, कितना बारीक काम है, सब कुछ डिसाइड करो बढ़िया से. And then more importantly, there is focus on inner spirituality. This is nothing but अंग्रेज कहते कि आपके पास बस अदर वर्ल्डली, हम कहेंगे देखो हम उसमें कितने बढ़िया, आपके पास है ही नहीं वो, तो हमने उसको इंटरनलाइज कर लिया. फॉर एग्जांपल मथुरा स्कल्पचर, अगेन सारनाथ स्कल्पचर ऑफ गुप्ता एरा, इट इज अ परफेक्ट एपिटोम of the spiritual serenity on this sculpture that can be shown. If you go to Ajanta paintings, look at the eyes of the figures there, human figures there. Again, perfection of classicism. कैसे? Because we focus on उसके through what spiritual message you're trying to give. तो हमने उसको invert कर लिया. So you have those dimensions. Then in the description, which I have to थोड़ा सा deconstruct, or you talk of a lot of things of subject matter. Style, you talk of technique. Three major dimensions of description. First is subject matter. For example, what is the picture, what is the painting, what is the sculpture, उसमें कहानी क्या है, उसका मतलब क्या है, उसका symbolic meaning क्या है. So that becomes one part of description. Second is stylistic analysis. अमरावती style, मथुरा style, उसमें फिगर, बॉडी कैसे है, आंखें कैसे हैं, कपड़े कैसे हैं, तो कुछ चीजें. एंड देन यू गो टू टेक्निक. लॉस्ट वैक्स है, टेम्पेरा है, फ्रेस्को है, फ्रेस्को म्यू है, इट कुड बी एनीथिंग, बट यू हैव सम टेक्नोलॉजी इन्वॉल्व्ड आल्सो. सो व्हेन यू डिस्क्राइब एन आर्ट फॉर्म, जैसे अजंता पेंटिंग की बात कर लेते फॉर अ मोमेंट. ये अजंता पेंटिंग टेल्स अबाउट हिस्ट्री ऑफ दैट एरा. अगेन सिंपल क्वेश्चन. सो व्हाट डू आई फोकस ऑन? अजंता में पेंटिंग कौन कौन सी याद ही नहीं आ रही मुझे, नहीं याद आएंगे, फर्क नहीं पड़ता, आगे चलो आंसर बन सकता है फिर भी. इवन डिस्पाइट रिकलेक्टिंग द स्पेसिफिक थीम्स ऑफ अजंता पेंटिंग, यू कैन स्टिल राइट एन आंसर. व्हेन यू फोकस ऑन सब्जेक्ट मैटर, स्टाइल एंड टेक्निक, यू हैव डाइवर्सिटी ऑफ डायमेंशंस. एडिशनली इफ यू रिमेंबर एक दो एग्जांपल्स, काम हो जाए, बढ़िया है. ठीक है. सो देन आफ्टरवर्ड्स, in recent era, what you have, I am purposefully not giving you names of the art historians. Who is 𝗓𝗏 𝗪𝗏, who is Ananda Kumar Swamy, who is Parul Pandya, who is Vidya Dahejiya. आपको नहीं चाहिए वो. It is not required for UPSC at all. But I have studied those, वहां से पॉइंट लेके आए, इसलिए बता रहा हूं मैं आपको. Then finally what we have is present जमाने में social history. What social history I can, जैसे उनका hairdo कैसे है, from hairdo can I tell about the gender roles of that era, from the activities in which the female characters are involved in the Mesolithic paintings, is there in the gender division of labor at that time, right? So you talk about, when the question is UPSC is asking is what do you know about the contemporary society from medieval temple sculpture, UPSC is asking you questions from the latest era. But you are mostly stuck into descriptive studies of art form, right? And when you talk about any era as such, questions could be either on this or this or this, that is fine. But if it is on nothing, you can create dimension. आपके पास ये सारे dimension डाल दो, so it becomes a template in itself. ठीक है. देवेंद्र पटनायक recently started some series on YouTube, और देखी होगी उसने, for art and culture. उसमें he has given one more template, which is also a good template which you can use. I will integrate that over here. What he says is roti kapda makan. So you come to know about food, you come to know about clothing, and you come to know about technology of making houses and everything. So roti, kapda, makan are 3 dimensions one should be in the answer for such kind of descriptive analysis. So when you analyze object, you have roti, kapda, makan. Only interpretative analysis. What do you know of that era? Roti, kapda, makan. Okay. He also talks about another template which is a very famous template that not only he but many people talk about. It comes from Indian tradition, सत्यम शिवम सुंदरम. पता है आपको सत्यम शिवम सुंदरम? सुना है आपने? गाना सुना होगा राज कपूर का पुराना सत्यम शिवम सुंदरम. So you have सत्यम, सत्यम means क्या है? What are the basic facts? Time, space, context. So facts, basic facts of that art form. कि अजंता पेंटिंग के बारे में भाई वाकाटकास in the 5th century in Deccan traps हो जाएगा आपका. सत्यम, किसका पैट्रोनेज है, एटसेट्रा. शिवम, here you go for subject matter analysis. उसका मतलब क्या है? Symbolic meaning of those painting and sculpture and art forms. What is the message they want to give us? Story क्या है? Narrative क्या है? That becomes your Shivam. And then you have Sundaram. Sundaram is about aesthetics. For example, if I go to Pahadi paintings, if I go to Rajput paintings, Rajasthani paintings, I have Baramasa, I have Ragamala. I talk of the Rasa. Shrungara Veera Karunadbhuta Hasya Bhayanakaha Vivatsaraudaru Shantascha Eti Navarasamata. 9 rasas are there. In some things, some rasas are more prominent. So I can tell that in the Baramasa, all the emotions come out. Okay, we don't have to go much deeper into aesthetical study because it is not part of our syllabus. But if you are able to add some part of aesthetics, at least one point of aesthetics, template, जैसे कोई बात आती है नाट्य शास्त्र की तो लिख दो. Even if a question is on performing dance, drama, music, anything, you can talk about this kind of art form adheres well with the basic tenets of classical ideas given or laid down by Bharata Muni in नाट्य शास्त्र. ये तो लिख सकते हो. हो गया आपको क्लासिकल आइडिया और एस्थेटिक्स, राइट? नहीं तो you can have such templates also. Now don't write these words in the answer. ये याद रखने की चीज है. Points तो इसके अंदर के आपको लिखने हैं. But my point is that when you look at the question, you should be able to come with an overall idea and not focus on specific dimension and obsess with it. क्योंकि प्री में वो ज्यादा पढ़ा है. Most of the books that you read in prelims are problematic. They don't give you the conceptual understanding, तो ये प्रॉब्लम होता है. ठीक है. So ये हो गई आपका प्रवचन. अब शुरू करते हैं आज का दिन. Now आपने अपनी किताब निकालो, नोटबुक. I will make you write some questions. These are the questions for today. I'll give you 10 minutes for every question. We'll write a question first. ये मॉडल रहेगा अपना आज से लेके अगले 6 दिन तक. You will write the answer first and then we'll discuss, and through that we'll come to know of template क्या करना है क्या नहीं. If I just describe like this, you will find अच्छा ये point तो बढ़िया है, आपके अंदर नहीं घुसेगा वो. ठीक है. Let us start writing. The first question. Mauryans made a remarkable contribution to Indian art and architecture. Elaborate. So what I have done today is to pick up some important eras: Mauryan, post-Mauryan, Gupta, Chola, Vijayanagara, and even Sultanate and Mughal Empire. So I have not gone into specific art forms. Art form नहीं पढ़ने हमें आज. We have to understand the dominant features of every era, which will form the background for that art form, which we shall see from tomorrow. So if a question comes from Mauryan era, then from this angle, this answer, you have some facts. जो आप सब जगह use करोगे Mauryan. If a question comes from Chola era, you have some ideas which you can use in any Chola art. Okay, so questions are descriptive and generic by and large. Most of them, if not all. शुरू करते हैं. The time starts now. Take 10 minutes. Write first answer. ठीक है, हो गया. डिस्कस करें. Now let us talk about intro conclusion later. Let us first focus on the main body for a few minutes. I will source answer from you and then arrange it in some way so that it will be self-revealing to you how to create mental templates. जैसे मैडम आप बताइए क्या लिखे में आंसर में बॉडी में क्या होना चाहिए बेसिकली. Okay. So you are going into the mostly the reason behind making the art primarily. What is the message, right? Importance of it. But question is not only about important. It is a generic question. So generic remarkable contribution है मतलब क्या क्या सब लिखना है उसमें. So it's a very open-ended question. So these are the correct points, but it is not the complete answer. ठीक है. So you went with the specific typology of the art form. I think half of you have, I just walked through you, half of you have done that, you have taken specific type of art form and then written about it. कि stupa है, palace है, pillar है, sculpture है, rock cut cave है. Right, so let me write that at one place. You have stupa, you have pillars, you have rock cut caves, you have palaces. उसके पहले स्कल्पचर भी है. चलो पैलेस. You have sculpture, correct. You have pottery as well. And pottery is called as Northern Black Polished Ware, NBPW. So you have these various typologies of art forms. So one structure would be you just write one point on each of them. आपका आंसर कंप्लीट हो गया. बट दैट वुड बी ओके एंड देन यू गिव सम एग्जांपल्स. तो का एग्जांपल ले दो आप कोई. यू गिव सम एग्जांपल ऑफ पिलर, यू गिव सम एग्जांपल ऑफ पिलर कैपिटल एंड देन राइट अबाउट इट. इट इज अ परफेक्टली फाइन आंसर. इट विल गिव यू एवरेज नंबर, नो प्रॉब्लम. टू ब्यूटिफाई इट व्हाट वी विल डू, वी विल ड्रॉ मैप ऑफ इंडिया अगेन, शो सम लोकेशन ऑफ अ पिलर एटसेट्रा. उससे थोड़ा सा आंसर इंप्रूव हो जाएगा. बट एज व्हाट आई एम ट्राइंग टू टेल यू, व्हेन यू वांट टू क्रिएट टेम्पलेट्स, you just don't think of typology, you think of many more things. For example, the person who is patronizing all these things and then these things, it is a royal art. And this is popular art. Why does it matter? Because royal art comes with huge funding. It comes with some intention, some purpose of imposing some royal ideology. As she is correctly saying, is trying to propagate certain type of message throughout the empire. And because it is directed from top, it is also uniform across India. The pillar sculpture would be uniform everywhere. But the popular art would be less long lasting. It would be more in terracotta than in stone. It would be more diverse. And it would also be the more representative of what common people are doing. So patronage comes with its own perspective that you can add in the answer. Even in patronage, you can have this part is religious, if fully or partly, and this part is secular. Right? But again, this is not complete. Yes. Yes. So we'll focus more on that. But more in, so we are focusing more and more in empire. What is the royal patronage, right? So we'll focus less on pottery. But आपको लिखना भी है कि modern era में, although we focus more on the royal thing, it does not mean that it was the only art in India. You had that line in the end. It's okay. So you can mention those points inside each of them. I did not understand. See, that is not art. The message of the edicts of Ashoka is not our scope of the subject. That is Ashoka and Dhamma and his moral and ethical issues, which is not the scope of our subject. What is our subject? For example, what we can add over here is actually a good point: calligraphy. The earliest known Indian calligraphy comes from Ashokan era. It is also an art form, the Brahmi script calligraphy. That is the one you can use. उसके अंदर का मतलब क्या हमें सवाल के देना देना है नहीं, at least in this question. Okay. Coins are true, but those coins are very rudimentary. We will not call them art form. The coins start becoming beautiful and a kind of plastic art only from the Indo-Greeks onwards. Okay. So you can add calligraphy over here if you want in pillars. That is a good point. Again, this is only one part. I need to have more analysis of how do you write the answer. Abhishek sir, bataiye. I can go for structural and stylistic features. So, in structural, क्या points होते हैं? Now, right now I am writing them separately. You can choose to include these points inside this also. I am not going by the structure of the answer. I am going just for generating points here, so that your answer becomes widespread. Structural features क्या है? किसी का भी एक तो मैसिव है, मॉन्यूमेंटल है, तो मैसिव. दिस इज नॉट जस्ट किसी जेब में आ जाए, बहुत बड़ी चीजें बनाई है. रॉयल आर्ट की बात कर रहे हैं, मॉन्यूमेंटलिटी है, देन वो स्टाइलिस्टिक में जाएगा, स्ट्रक्चरल में नहीं जाएगा. करेक्ट. उसके भी पहले वो लिथिक है एंड देन यू गो फॉर मोनोलिथिक. Right? And one more point, that is polished surfaces, because that is the archetypical identificatory mark of what is Mauryan or not Mauryan. If you find some sculpture खोदते खोदते मिल गया आपको, and if you don't know which era it belongs, if it is polished, आंख मूंद के कहो Mauryan है. Pre-Mauryan, post-Mauryan sculptures generally don't come in polish. ठीक है? So you have polished surfaces. And then stylistic features, as you are seeing, realistic है. It is a very important feature, not realism. If you look at धौली elephant, उसका एक घुटना मुड़ा हुआ है, लगता है जैसे जिंदा होके बाहर चल के आ रहा है. If you look at, for example, the horse on the abacus of Sarnath and Sanchi, दौड़ रहा है. So if you look at the geese on the Vajrasan given to Gaya by Ashoka, तो वहां पे वो geese भी दाना चुग रहे हैं. So all the animals which are shown are primarily realistic. They are in movement. So there is a dynamism. Then if you go for Mauryan architecture, actually it is not a 3D architecture. You understand difference in 3D and 2D, right? 2D मतलब painting is a two-dimensional painting and 3D is a sculpture. लेकिन अब जब आप बस दीवार के ऊपर sculpting करते हो, you start carving something on the surface of the wall, then you go somewhat deep, but you don't go completely deep ताकि उसकी पीछे वाली साइड में दिखाई दे. So that is neither 2D nor 3D. It is more than 2D, less than 3D. Back तो खुली नहीं है. It is called as 2.5 dimensional. Yes. तो generally नहीं वो अलग बात होगी. That's the nature of pillar. क्योंकि हम polished की बात कर रहे हैं, we can talk about that. कि these are plain circular pillars. ठीक है. I am talking about the style of sculptures here primarily. तो they are 2.5 dimensional. किसी भी एनिमल को पूरा पीछे से नहीं दिखाया तो ठीक से नहीं दिखाया, बहुत रेयरली दिखाया है, because the basic idea is to 2.5 dimension and not there is no deep carving there. It's a limitation. So you have realism, naturalism, you have movement and dynamism, you have 2.5 dimensions. These are the stylistic features. Now I don't need to write them separately. If at all, what I can do is इन्हीं पॉइंट को मैं ऐड कर दूं स्कल्पचर में. So when I explain sculpture, for example, 𝗲𝗏𝗀𝗃𝗃, it's the best example of ancient Indian sculpture. More an example, 𝗲𝗏𝗀𝗃𝗃, बहुत खूबसूरत, सबने देखी है उसका फोटो. तो you can explain this thing there. Realistic है, naturalistic है, right? And then you have one more thing, that is subject matter analysis. Subject matter analysis. For example, what do you have in those sculptures on the wall of either 𝗏𝗏 cave or stupa or individual animal capital or pillar capital? Primarily you have animals, very less humans. So main focus is on animal, in which the Mauryan artists excel. Humans are not the main subject. They are less. And if at all they are there, they are popular and not royal. रॉयल आर्ट में तो ह्यूमन एक भी नहीं है. जो कुछ मूर्तियां मिलती है पॉपुलर लेवल पे मिलती है, लोगों ने बनाई हुई, राइट? देन यू हैव लेस अमाउंट ऑफ. देन एक हाथ you have flora, fauna. The flora, actually flora and geometric pattern. We can talk about that. So the point that she has said कि it shows the amalgamation of foreign ideas also. आप उसको भी लिख सकते हैं inspiration में. So whenever you look at a question like Maurya, I just want you to think that in your answer, whatever structure you may choose only to go by stupa, pillar, rock cut, palace. It is completely fine. Within that you write one paragraph, 2-3 लाइन लिखोगे उसके अंदर. तो apart from the name of the example, you should write something कि भाई rock cut architecture massive है, pillar है monolithic, you have animals on pillar capital. So you either go that way or straight away you make the 4 parts of the answer. In the first part you just mention these typologies and get on with it. इसमें ज़्यादा टहलना नहीं है, काम हो गया. Then the second paragraph talk about the structural features 1, 2, 3. Then stylistic feature 1, 2, 3, and then you have subject matter analysis 1, 2, 3. तो 2, 3 पॉइंट आएंगे, 4 मेजर सब हेडिंग बनेंगे, आंसर विल बी वेल राउंडेड. And this is the template. You have typologies, you have structural and technical features, you have stylistic analysis, you have subject matter. ये जो 4 खाके बनेंगे, they will be applicable to various answers. तो आपको हर एरा के 1-2 पॉइंट्स भी पता चल जाएंगे, हो जाएगा काम आपका. Right? Now come to the main point, and that is how do you introduce and conclude this answer. यहाँ पे you need to have some specific idea of Mauryan Empire. थोड़ा सा context पता होना चाहिए, but generally let me give you one template for introduction conclusion in culture answer. It may work in many questions, not all. कई जगह काम करती है. वो है आपका backward linkage, question वाला area and forward linkage. So intro should be about उसके पहले क्या था, and conclusion should be about उसके बाद क्या हुआ. This is the one. Over our next entire week I will introduce many varieties of templates. This is our first template of intro conclusion. पहले क्या था, बाद में क्या हुआ, backward forward connection. So what was the kind of art and architecture there before Mauryan era? था ही नहीं. And that is the main point. अगर था तो लकड़ी में था, गायब हो गया. It did not survive because it was perishable. So the remarkable contribution of Mauryan Empire is actually the beginning of the history of India's art and architecture. After a long gap of time, हड़प्पा में जो खत्म हुआ, मौर्य ने रिवाइव किया. After हड़प्पा till Maurya, बीच के पूरे हजारों साल के गैप में there is no architecture. There are only potteries है, कुछ बचे हुए, tools है, that's all. You have nothing left. And it started, और क्या शानदार शुरुआत है. शुरुआत में छक्का मार दिया पहले बॉल पे. That is the context. कि when you start making it in the monumental skill on permanent basis, it doesn't show कि ये शुरुआती काम, first answer लिखा है तो खराब आंसर बना है. पहले आंसर में 10 में से 10 मिल गए इसको. So that is the context. And in conclusion, it created a foundation of future things. Simple. Evolution बाद में चलता रहा, foundation बना दिया. बिल्कुल कर सकते हैं, बिल्कुल कर सकते हैं, कर सकते हैं, कोई बात नहीं. बट दिस वुड बी लेस इंपॉर्टेंट देन व्हाट आई एम टेलिंग राइट नाउ, बिकॉज द क्वेश्चन इज रिमार्केबल कंट्रीब्यूशन इन द हिस्ट्री ऑफ इंडियन आर्ट. तो हिस्ट्री ऑफ इंडियन आर्ट में आपको उसको लोकेट करना है, मतलब इट इज प्रोवाइडिंग अ फाउंडेशन फॉर द फ्लरिशिंग ऑफ फ्यूचर आर्ट फॉर्म. दैट आल्सो बिकम्स इक्वली रादर मोर एप्रोप्रिएट. बिल्कुल कर सकते हैं. नेशनल एम्ब्लेम है, अशोक चक्र है, आरबीआई के सामने की बिल्डिंग की अक्षय श्रेणी है. देयर आर लॉट्स ऑफ एग्जांपल्स. सो यू कैन कंक्लूड दैट वे आल्सो कि दिस art and architecture continues to inspire and inform national art even today. Correct? That makes a good conclusion. But don't add different. ये अलग अलग पॉइंट्स हैं, सब मत जोड़ना, एक साथ खिचड़ी हो जाएगी. Either this or that, not all of them. ठीक है. So I will give you a handout. आप जैसे बाहर जाओगे आज क्लास के बाद, I will purposefully give you after the class, not before the class, every day. So I have given all these points here also. You have palace art, religious, royal, popular art, structural features. You have stylistic features, subject matter, everything given with some conclusion also. Okay, so every answer we'll discuss, we'll have a model answer. Actually, I should not do that, I know, but without that, आपको नींद नहीं आएगी और आप मेरी नींद खराब कर दोगे. So, but one more thing, do not take them as model answer. They are indicative answers. And secondly, I am following volume of 500 words and not 250 words. आपको जो लिखना है उसका डबल मैं दूंगा, क्योंकि आप आधा तो भूल जाओगे ऐसे, राइट? सो I would give you 500 words का आंसर and not 250 का. It will be, my focus is more on comprehensiveness rather than being precise, क्योंकि सवाल का डायरेक्शन क्या होगा हमें पता नहीं है. So that is the limit. I will follow 500 words. I will not cross that. मैं आपको 2 पन्ना आंसर नहीं दूंगा. 500 आंसर, 500 words only. ठीक है, I think that would be more useful. आपको 200 वर्ड याद है, आप लिख दोगे उसमें. But even more useful than that is this exercise that we are doing. We will generate those answers here in the class. ठीक है. So you got the idea of the first answer. That you have to talk about the monumentality, talk about the beginning of the foundation, and that also in the very beginning it is a great sculpture, great structure. ठीक है. So whenever a question comes on Mauryan art in a different way also, let us say only on Mauryan pillar, only on Mauryan sculpture, some features of Mauryan empire, ये जो common चीजें हैं रहेगी हमेशा. It will not change. So this is a Mauryan era का template आपका बन गया. Let us go to the next question. Yes. You can see वहाँ पे ना एक थोड़ा सा डिबेट है. You are right. In the art, you can talk about literary art also, and we should not confine ourselves only to visual arts. But the dating of Arthashastra is little complicated. There are certain portions of Arthashastra which may belong to the Mauryan era, but now there is a consensus that large portion of it is actually post-Mauryan. That is one thing. And secondly, still, if you go by traditional way, you can just add one. Literature में भी contribution था, for example, अर्थशास्त्र, but उसमें again दोबारा एक बात है, अर्थशास्त्र written first by the founder and then Mauryan Empire शुरू होता है, right? So Mauryan Empire का आर्ट का मतलब ये होना चाहिए कि राजा ने पैट्रोनाइज किया तब जाके आर्ट बनी. ये तो जिसने राजा को बनाया वो लिख रहा है. Megasthenes you can read, but again, if you can talk of Megasthenes, okay. ठीक है, लिटरेचर आर्ट अर्थशास्त्र में लिख सकते हो, but it would not be very exactly correct. You can write both against Megasthenes and अर्थशास्त्र, इंडिया का अर्थशास्त्र एक लाइन में कोई दिक्कत. But we don't know much about Megasthenes anyway. You know the story of the book. The book has not survived. The book is lost. It survived through many secondary quotations, जिसको हमने कंपाइल करके किताब को रिक्रिएट किया है in the previous century. ठीक है. So next question. Let us start. Can we characterize the period of 5 centuries after the decline of Mauryas as the dark age of Indian history? Your time starts now. 10 minutes. Anybody? Shall we discuss? So, how would you approach this question? Anything. Oral approach. So you have hit all the correct right check boxes. First of all, you discuss with why somebody calls it a dark age. The reason is primarily twofold. One is a political fragmentation. Question is, so what? Idea ये है कि on one end of the age we have Mauryan Empire which unifies almost entire India. On the other bookend of the era we have Gupta Empire which also unifies almost entire north of India. So it is an era, the post-Mauryan era is an era between the two subcontinental empires. जब unification है तो बीच में सब टुकड़े पड़े हुए 500 साल के लिए India is fragmented. So what? The assumption here is that once you have unified empire, a strongly centralized unitary power, you have less conflicts, you have more stability, more peace, and therefore opportunity for progress. Economy, culture start flourishing, provided you have peace and stability and unification. The contrary is that there are lots of powers jostling for their domination, fragmentation हो चुका है, so there will be constant wars, so instability and therefore destruction of resources and life, no peace, and therefore economy and culture will go down. That is the basic understanding. When you say political fragmentation, ऐसे हमारी कोई चाह नहीं कि वो unified power हो तो हमें अच्छा लगता है. It's not अच्छा लगना, it's about the consequences of unification क्या होते हैं. So that is first presumption. The second presumption is that you have lots of foreign invasions. Indo-Greeks, Shakas, as she correctly said, Shakas, Kushanas, Parthians. So northwest of India and Gujarat, Rajasthan, Haryana, Punjab, Sindh, or even western UP, Mathura region, Malwa, MP region, all these things, all these regions are ruled by foreign power. So India is almost colonized in a way. India is under imperial control of foreigners for almost 300-400 years. So उस angle से भी it's a dark age. So these are the two basic ideas of calling it a dark age. Now again, foreigners होने से बुराई नहीं है. Foreigners का point ये है कि they are bringing their own culture, own ideas, and Indian culture is receiving setback. That is the extended argument. So when you say no, it was not a dark age, you cannot refute the fact कि भाई political fragmentation तो था, foreigner rule तो था, but the consequences that we expect because of these two, they were not there. So despite political fragmentation, despite having instability, we continue to have economic prosperity and socio-cultural advancement. That is the point. That linkage आपके missing है answer. And secondly, even though those were the foreigners, very soon they got Indianized, and rather they not only patronized Indian culture, they became the conduit of the expansion of Indian culture outside India. वहीं तो बुद्धिज्म बाहर लेके गए, वहीं तो संस्कृत बाहर लेके गए. So game उल्टा हो गया. And not only in the northwest, look at the southeast India. In southeast also, for the first time, you see lots of Indian influence happening in Cambodia, Vietnam, Indonesia, Myanmar region. So Indian culture is not on setback. Internally also, as she correctly said, you go by art form to art form, you see हर जगह improvement हो रही है. So simple बात है कि you to first, in the first part of the answer, talk about the rationale behind calling it a dark age, two things, and then you refute the argument that despite these two things, it was not a dark age because of internal progress, economic and cultural, both, and expansion of Indian culture outside India. That is the basic idea. Well, one historian has funnily still called it dark age from some other angle, and that angle is that we have paucity of resources to study history. History पूरे रीजन में सब जगह चल रही है, सब जगह रीजन कुछ हो रहा है और हम सब जानते नहीं because resources ही नहीं है. So because of lack of resources, अगर आप dark age कहो तो ठीक है, then that would not be wrong. So why do you call it dark age also? That matters. So let me walk you through some major points very quickly, structurally also. That the term dark age implies a period of political fragmentation, cultural backwardness, and societal regression. Originally, the term was applied to this era, but this is suspect. So, हमने introduction बता दिया कि भाई we doubt the application of the term. Then you talk about why it is called dark age, fragmentation, politically, and foreign invasion. Explain both the points, very easy. Then you go to refutation of the argument. Then you talk of political landscape also. Within politics, you see fragmentation is not bad. You have to look at it in a perfect way. Actually, it is nothing. Absence of one unified empire does not necessarily mean economic or cultural regression. आपको ये पता है कि made by Roman Empire, यूरोप में हो, Chinese Empire, चाइना में हो. For both of these regions, unification is a norm. Fragmentation is exception. That is one. इंडिया में उल्टा है. इंडिया में गुप्ता है, उसके पहले मौर्य है, फिर सल्तनत मुगल थोड़ा सा है, मराठा है, ब्रिटिश है. तो we have very few centuries of unification. अखंड भारत बहुत कम रहा है सदियों से. और 400-500 साल आते हैं, you have विखंडित भारत only. Even today we have विखंडित भारत. It goes on in a cycle. So for us, fragmentation is a norm, political fragmentation. And secondly, those other civilizations, they perform well socially, culturally, economically when they are unified. इंडिया में यूनिफिकेशन की जरूरत नहीं है, उसके बावजूद हम कल्चरली, सोशली, इकोनॉमिक अच्छा कर लेते हैं. So these two things are not connected. Unification political level पे हो, on the other hand economic social improvement ho. Secondly, moreover during the post-Mauryan era, there was the emergence of first states throughout India. South India, Chera, Chola, Pandya, Deccan, Satavahan, East में 𝗪𝗲𝗀. So the states are now everywhere. State society is getting entrenched. It's a progress, not regress. Look at the prashastis that emerge in this era. They talk about the entrenching monarchical ideal in all parts of India. So it's improvement. Then you go for economic angle. Urbanization spread everywhere. Intense trade with Roman Empire. All regions came under monetization of economy. So you have economic progress also. Religions, we have extremely influential Mahayan religion emerging. Nagarjuna, Nagasen, both of them came from this era. You have again rock-cut architecture and stupa cult spreading everywhere at popular level. So philosophical at the elite level and popular cult also at level. You have Vaishnavism and Shaivism getting crystallized, spreading everywhere, including Afghanistan. You find evidence of Vaishnavism north of Afghanistan, Hindu Kush ke us par. Then you have cultural. You have the process of the Aryanization of South India beginning. The stories of Brahmins going to South and they coming into the trade fold. You have Sanskrit language becoming the court language for the first time. Before that, Sanskrit was not a court language. It was other languages. It is the first long Sanskrit inscription of classical nature in Rudradaman. Rudradaman's Junagadh inscription is the first long classical Sanskrit inscription. उसके पहले जो कोई है, उसके पहले आपको 𝗪𝗲𝗀 हो, अशोका हो, सातवाहन हो, सब प्राकृत में लिखते हैं, not Sanskrit. Sanskrit is an old language, but it becomes the court language of elite for the first time in this era. And then you have lots of literature in various languages, Sangam literature in Tamil, you have Gatha Saptashati in Prakrit, and lots of other in Sanskrit. So this is a cultural advancement. Then you have external influence. So these foreigners quickly got Indianized, accepted either Hinduism or Buddhism, and then helped in creation of a new art forms like Gandhar style or patronized Indian culture. So Nahapana patronized Karle Cave. You have soon they have helped in spread of Indian culture abroad in northwest or in south. And also Indian culture was not inward looking or defensive. You see expansion in Southeast Asia. So from no angle, it is a dark age. Simple. Now why this question is important, although it contains society, economy, polity, everything, whenever a question comes from only stupa or only Gandhar or Mathura, only rock-cut cave, you should know that it's what is the era and what are the features of the era. आपको ये points handy आएंगे वहां पे sprinkle करने के लिए. अब question let us say come from stupa. तो stupa किसने बनाए? Not only Indian kings but also foreign kings. If you go to northwest, lots of stupas are patronized by all these foreigners. Even in rock-cut caves, you have examples of not only Satavahana patronage but also Shaka patronage. So आपको ये intermixing cosmopolitan culture दिखाई देगा. So that becomes your ethos of the era, which becomes your points of analysis, which you can sprinkle then in various other answers. ठीक है? Or if you found nothing else, you can just use the template of dark age. कोई भी क्वेश्चन आता है which is only for post-Mauryan, if you don't think of introduction, think of dark age. Although it was termed as dark by British, actually it was a glorious era. because of this kind of contribution. Answer shuru. Right? So you should know the features of the era. First thing that we did for Mauryan was remarkable beginning, क्योंकि from the beginning you have great monumentality even though you don't have past. So if a question comes from Ashoka or Stupa in Mauryan era, आपके पास context है. Similarly, you have a context over here now. ठीक है? Perfect. Any doubt online? Okay, you have a couple of comments. Not a dark age, Satavahanas, matrilineal names, Samakshi is not the point. And again, it's a wrong point in a way, because it is actually a patriarchy only. Patriarchy है, patri locality है, सब कुछ है, बस नाम जो है माँ का लगाते हैं, और फिर माँ का नाम भी नहीं लगाते सातवाहना. It is not matrilineal names, it is actually the gotra of mother. Vasishthi putra Pulyami, Vasishthi is the gotra of mother, not name of mother. Gautami putra Satkarni, Gautam is the gotra of his mother, not name of his mother. And it is not exclusive to Satavahanas. Even in North India, Shungas sometimes do that. You have Kashi putra Bhagabhadra, was a great Shunga king. So Kashi was the gotra of his mother. So it was a tradition among some Brahmin families across India at that time, जो अपने नाम में माँ का गोत्र का नाम यूज करेंगे. That's all. It does not mean that queens were necessarily more powerful or were politically active. So material political power उससे translate automatically नहीं होती. हो सकता है कि there was more equality relatively given to women at that time. It is completely possible. We have some evidences, but that does not mean कि वो gender roles reverse कर दे पूरा. ठीक है. Unified empire doesn't always mean golden age. Fragmentation and different empires helped in evolving culture. Correct. This point is correct. ठीक है. You can use that argument, but it is not applicable to this era. In the post-Mauryan 5 centuries, it is actually the other way around. Religion is flourishing. You see, Buddhism, which started as a very strict old early Buddhism, its tenor completely changed when it spread outside Bihar, UP, the rest of India and subcontinent, and it absorbed. Like Silk Route की बात करो, it's an era of Silk Route. Silk Route पे जो आदमी व्यापारी बैठा है, let us say in some region of Afghanistan, Bamiyan में, his concerns are very different from the concerns of a गरीब आदमी in पाटलिपुत्र उससे 500 साल पहले जब बुद्धा था. तो बुद्धा का मैसेज which he gave to a गरीब आदमी, a दरिद्री in पाटलिपुत्र और श्रावस्ती, if the same message is given to a merchant on Silk Route 500 years later, he बोलेगा घर जाओ, मुझे क्या करना है. उसके concerns अलग है. तो religion has to change and evolve. Mahayana solves that problem. So Mahayana is actually उस era के requirement के लिए अनुकूल modification है in Buddhism. Secondly, come to Vaishnavism, Shaivism. Once it also starts spreading the rest of India, you see lots of tribal gods became part of it. Avataravad starts coming into being. Land grants absorb these many ethnic regions into main fold. So these 5 centuries are actually religious point of view also very vibrant. आप जो बोल रहे हो सही है, बट वो आता है गुप्ता पोस्ट गुप्ता में आता है, नॉट पोस्ट मौर्य. ठीक है. यस. Well, you can say, but that is not relevant over here. है ना, गुप्ता में क्या हुआ हमें उससे लेने देना है नहीं यहाँ पे इस क्वेश्चन में. ठीक है. But what you can see is in the conclusion at least कि this period is not a dark age. आपका point बस political था. You can go for overall era, जो I think मैंने लिखा भी है यहाँ पे कि it would be more appropriate to consider the post-Mauryan period as a transitional phase in Indian history marked by regionalization, which created the foundation for the future golden age during Gupta era. Gupta era का golden age doesn't emerge out of vacuum. It stands on the shoulder of the post-Mauryan decades. तो कुछ तो उन्होंने फाउंडेशन का काम किया है. It's a prosperity, huge amount of trade. ठीक है. You can go connect that way. So backward linkage, forward linkage. Backward आप कह सकते हो. Somebody I think आप या किसी ने शुरू भी किया है कि भाई Mauryan era was centralized, fragmentation हुआ. So that could be a good beginning of the answer. In the conclusion, you talk about कि it created the foundation for Golden Age of Gupta Empire. Again, backward forward. ठीक है, simple, no doubt. चलो, let us move on to the next question. Same question again. The Gupta period has often been referred to as Golden Age due to its cultural heritage. Do you agree? Again, a simple, nice, good question. लिखिए. You have got 8 minutes, 9 minutes, जितने भी होते हैं. टाइम हो गया. चलो, it's a good question, but it has got a few concepts within it, so this is a good opportunity for me to tell you those concepts. कुछ बताएंगे how to approach this question? Okay, ठीक है. Okay, ठीक है. So you, that is fine, that is okay way. देखो, when you say golden age, what does it mean? Exactly, all spheres. So all spheres and all art forms, everything. It should be like not an extremely great point of attainment, which comes because of all-round development of society. So polity, economy, culture, society सब में होगा. We have to focus more on culture here. Question is on cultural heritage, but it does not mean you can just brush off everything else. आपको एक लाइन में polity economy mention करनी होगी. Golden age का context है. Now, so when you justify that it was a golden age, आपको उसका थोड़ा context पता हो कि ये शब्द कहाँ से आता है. Every society believes that it has got some kind of golden age in the past, जो हमें दोबारा recreate करना है. It's a utopia of the past which guides our future. If you go to British society, you will see that they still think of Victorian age, of late 19th century, or even before that, 15th, 16th century wala Elizabethan era of Shakespeare, etc. That is a golden age for them. If you go to Greece, you have Periclean Greek age. Pericles था उसका समय है. So in India also, we create an utopia. It is a romanticism of people today to think of some part of past as golden age, which was actually a counter to the narrative by British जो कहते थे कोई और era dark age है. तो dark age and golden age binary की तरह आते हैं. कोई era dark age, कोई era golden age. हम आज के दिन में we do not agree with both the terms. ना हम dark age को dark age समझते हैं, ना golden age को golden age समझते हैं. तो इसलिए दोनों क्वेश्चंस आई हैव पुट देम वन आफ्टर अनदर. डार्क एज को हमने खारिज कर दिया है, गोल्डन एज को हमने पूरा खारिज नहीं किया है, लेकिन उसको हमने मॉडिफाई किया है. तो व्हेन यू कॉल इट गोल्डन एज, पॉलिटिकल, सोशल, इकोनॉमिक, कल्चरल, एवरीथिंग शुड बी एट वेरी हाई लेवल. आई विल डिस्कस इन द आंसर आल्सो. लेट मी स्टार्ट देयर ओनली फर्स्ट. थोड़ा सा मैंने कॉम्प्रिहेंसिव लिया है, नॉट फोकसिंग ओनली ऑन दिस. सो गोल्डन एज इज ऑफन रिफर्ड टू एज due to cultural heritage. It was the time of unity, enlightened monarchy, peace and prosperity, and there was significant advances in art, literature, science and mathematics. The reasons, पहली बात तो political stability. After a gap of 500 years, again connect with the previous question, again North India is unified, and then it was a period of relative peace and stability which allowed for flourishing of art, literature and of science. Then you go for economic prosperity, which can be seen in the very good quality and pure gold coins, which supports entire prosperity as such. And then you go for religious tolerance. This is a more important point that I think most of you have not written about it. Before the art comes religion always. Religious में you see harmony. Hinduism, Buddhism, Jainism are working together. There is no conflict between them, neither at popular level nor at philosophical level. For example, it is Q.R.Gupta, a Vaishnava king who started a Buddhist Nalanda University. Kalidas is a Shaiva, a court poet in a Vaishnava king. So Shaivism, Vaishnavism में harmony है, Buddhism, Hinduism में harmony है. So you have sectarian and religious harmony, and this is the era of the emergence of Puranic religion. It is no more Vedic religion. So Vedic religion has now transformed itself into the next avatar, which is Puranic religion, which is trying to assimilate entire India into its fold. It's an assimilatory religion. So different regions, different practices, different cultures, women, Shudras, sab saath mein le aaye. So it is a highly tolerant, inclusive culture. That kind of harmony is reflected also in art and culture. तो ये बहुत इंपॉर्टेंट पॉइंट है, गुप्ता एरा का मिस कभी नहीं करना है. रिलीजियस सिंक्रेटिज्म और टॉलरेंस. Then you go for intellectual advancement, the typical development of science and technology. You have Zero, Aryabhat, Sushruta and everything. These are typical points. इसमें कोई बड़ी बात है नहीं. Then you go for cultural patronage. Here you have various art forms, temples, caves, Sanskrit language, etc. Sculptures. And then you go for cultural diffusion outside India as well. That point is always there. And then you go for counter कि भाई इसका मतलब नहीं कि सब कुछ बढ़िया था. There were many problems also. So you have political problems कि India was not as centralized as it is thought to be. Gupta Empire was quite decentralized and they did not create all India Empire as Mauryans. Lots of parts of India were outside Gupta domain. Especially it was restricted to only north of Narmada. Then economic. So extent of prosperity was not shared wide. It was inequality also. Some urban centers were more prosperous. Similarly, culture, you see that there are significant regional differences. And then our focus excessively is only on Sanskritic culture. क्या भारत में एक ही भाषा थी? What about other cultures? They may or may not be in the golden age, but we don't study them. We don't know. Right? So that is the overall idea. But ultimately कहना है कि however, there is no doubt that Gupta Empire was a time of great cultural and intellectual achievement. ये तो इसको मानने great तो है, golden है कि नहीं ये doubt है. So this is a typical answer. इसमें कोई दिक्कत नहीं है. But I want to make use of that and introduce you something else which is more important for you from the exam viewpoint. When you talk of golden age, you talk of political, economic, social and cultural advancement collectively in all spheres of life. So now we can argue that it was not actually completely golden age. It has elements of greatness, but it does not mean it is golden for everybody. It has limitations. ये तो हमारा conclusion हो गया. But even if that is so, you have to understand there is something else that is only about culture. Golden age as a term may be suspect, but culture was at its one of the peaks. इसके बारे में कोई doubt ही नहीं है. So we use a different term for that, and that is classical age. Now golden and classical are two related, but थोड़ा सा different. Classical age is primarily only about culture. You can talk of culture plus religion over here. Culture plus religion. What does it contain? When I say this era is classical era, like क्या movie classic movie थी. So what is classical? I will give you 7 points for the meaning of classical, one by one, और वो 7 points रट लो आप. They will be extremely useful because whenever a question comes from any part of Gupta era, Ajanta painting, Sarnath sculpture, anywhere you go to Gupta era, those 7 points will be as themselves applicable as descriptive features. ठीक है, तो पहला पॉइंट समझ लो मीनिंग ऑफ क्लासिकल. फर्स्ट पॉइंट, अगर फर्स्ट 3 पॉइंट जो है वो आपका है आईएएस. वो आसान रहेगा याद. आई डोंट जनरली डू नेमोनिक्स इन माय क्लास, बट यहाँ पे थोड़ा सा करना पड़ेगा. आईएएस का मतलब है इंटेलेक्चुअल, एस्थेटिक एंड स्पिरिचुअल. ठीक है. सो गुप्ता एरा आर्ट is intellectually informed. कालिदास is not vulgar. उसमें एक intellectual aspect है. सारनाथ बुद्धा में एक intellectual aspect है. Then you go for aesthetic. So aesthetically also quite refined. आपका जो रस परिपोष होता है, the rasa creation, rasa निष्पत्ति is that level of aesthetics is very good. I'm just trying to give you adjectives to use in the answer in a way. And then spiritually कि it is very much evolved. ये 3 पॉइंट हो गए. Then you go for the 4th point. That and these points are applicable. Let us say a question comes on only Sanskrit literature of Gupta era. यही points है. Examples change होते जाएंगे. कालिदास कभी आएगा कुछ और आएगा. Example aesthetic, intellectual, spiritual, and then other points also. Then you talk of next point कि it informs all the art forms. That is important for you to understand. Generally, there is exception also. ऐसे कभी नहीं होता कि लिटरेचर पीक पे है, पेंटिंग नीचे है. If it is aesthetic, intellectual, spiritual, patronage and ethos of the society, it will inform almost every art form. So every classical age में हर there is exception also, but every other art form is at the peak. तो पेंटिंग भी होगा, अजंता पेंटिंग, स्कल्पचर, सारनाथ स्कल्पचर, लिटरेचर, कालिदास. You have 3 best examples. एक्सेप्शन है वो है टेम्पल्स. टेम्पल्स की जस्ट शुरुआत हुई है. सो इट इज नॉट द क्लासिकल एज फॉर टेम्पल आर्किटेक्चर. टेम्पल का क्लासिकल एज आएगा इन द अर्ली मेडिवल, राजपूत एरा. सो दैट इज एक्सेप्शन नागर स्टाइल का. बट फॉर एवरी अदर आर्ट फॉर्म इट इज द सो ऑल आर्ट फॉर्म्स. एंड देन यू हैव टू गो फॉर नेक्स्ट थिंग, दैट इज हार्मनी. It is the most difficult aspect. Generally, some art forms like Gandhar more focus on physical aspects. Muscle कितने बने हैं, anatomical accuracy कैसे है, is it realism or not? So that is a Gandhar style. Focus on the material aspects. If you come to Mathura, physical aspect पे ध्यान होगा नहीं. That is not important. It is inner spiritual beauty. So Mathura versus Gandhar dichotomy of the early centuries, that is the post-Mauryan age, जो थी material versus spiritual, वो resolve हो जाएगी. If you go to Sarnath, you see दोनों का harmonious balance हो गया है, which is the most difficult thing to do, वो balance maintain करना. So intellectual and spiritual, material and sublime, material and spiritual का balance है यहाँ पे. ये बहुत बड़ी बात है गुप्ता एरा की, जो गुप्ता एरा के बाद में नहीं रही थी. And then you have last point यहाँ पे, एक्चुअली 5 नहीं 7 नहीं 6 पॉइंट्स हैं कि स्टैंडर्ड. इट इज अ वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट आइडिया. व्हेन यू आर से क्लासिकल, इट मींस इट क्रिएट्स अ स्टैंडर्ड और बेंचमार्क ऑफ असेसिंग ब्यूटी फॉर फ्यूचर. उसके बाद जो कोई कवि आएगा, कविता कैसी है, कालिदास की तरह. तो कालिदास उपमा कालिदासस्य, ही क्रिएटेड अ स्टैंडर्ड बेंचमार्क फॉर फ्यूचर असेसमेंट कि भाई सुंदर किसको कहते हैं. बुद्धा का स्कल्पचर कौन सा बढ़िया, सारनाथ का. सो यू क्रिएट अ डेफिनेशन ऑफ ब्यूटी बाय विच ऑल द फ्यूचर आर्ट फॉर्म्स आर जज्ड, कि उसके नजदीक जितना जाएगा उतना सुंदर, वरना नहीं. राइट. सो यू क्रिएट अ स्टैंडर्ड बेंचमार्क फॉर फ्यूचर आर्ट फॉर्म्स. व्हेन यू हैव ऑल दीज थिंग्स, देन यू कॉल इट क्लासिकल. लेट मी एडिशनली टेल यू वन मोर थिंग. थोड़ा सा यूरोपियन आर्ट हिस्ट्री अगर आप पढ़ोगे, आप दिखा भी सकते हो वैसे किसी आंसर में. यू हैव एन इन्वर्टेड बेल कर्व लाइक दिस और नॉर्मल बेल कर्व. यहां पे कोई भी आर्ट फॉर्म, दिस इज अ टाइमलाइन एंड दिस इज रिफाइनमेंट. whenever art form starts, it starts somewhere at the beginning. You have primitive art form, let us say a painting. So if you go to prehistoric painting, they are primitive, they are not very refined. Then you go for next stage, that is experimental. यहाँ पे you experiment a lot to arrive at some kind of harmony. Harmony नहीं achieve हो रही है. So whatever you have in the post-Mauryan era is experimental. In sculpture, for example, you would have Mathura and Gandhar, Amravati, experimental है. Then emerges classical. Classical में you ultimately reach that point, जो कि peak है, जो गुप्ता era में आता है. Then you go for Baroque. It is European classical sense, not in Indian, but आपको idea लग जाएगी. Baroque में होता क्या है, in classical आपने standard तो set कर लिया, तो you created codified canon of proportions, of beauty, of processes. इसको follow करना है. तो next succeeding generation start following it as if it's a template जो हम तोड़ नहीं सकते. So inner vitality is gone. स्पिरिचुअल हार्मनी इज गॉन बट फॉर्म रहता है, तो थोड़ा सा वो बरोक ग्रोटेस्क टाइप होता शुरू हो जाता है, तो वो फिजिकली सही है बट अंदर की आत्मा चली गई उसकी। मतलब डेकोरेशन कभी कभी एक्सेसिव हो गया। फॉर एग्जाम्पल इन द अर्ली medieval literature you find very technical refined संस्कृत लैंग्वेज, बट जो बैलेंस था कालिदास का वो नहीं रहा, तो वो बरॉक हो गया। धीरे धीरे अधिक ज्यादा डेकोरेटेड, टेक्निकलिटी बहुत हाई है बट इनर रिफाइंड बैलेंस नहीं है, एंड देन यू हैव डिक्लाइन। सो व्हेन यू से गुप्ता एरा इज क्लासिकल, इट्स क्लासिकल फॉर लिटरेचर, इट इज क्लासिकल फॉर पेंटिंग, इट इज क्लासिकल फॉर स्कल्पचर, बट not for architecture. For architecture and especially temple, it is still over here. Architecture थोड़ा सा फेज लैग में चल रहा है, गुप्ता के 500 साल बाद वो यहाँ पे पहुंच जाएगा, तब तक बाकी आर्ट डिक्लाइन हो गए होंगे। So whenever you write a question Gupta classicism, do not mention temple, वो एरर मत करना, ठीक है? But you got the idea. So these are the elements of classicism. So what you can say is that even though, if you want to write a different conclusion, even though Gupta era ka goldenness is suspect, what is not suspect is its classicism. वो तो है ही है. So in political, economic, social, we may have doubt of the extent of greatness, but in cultural, we have no doubt. So golden है कि नहीं ये अलग, classical तो है, ठीक है? I think these terms are clear to you now. Okay. Any doubt online? No doubt. Shall we stop here? एकदम तुरंत yes. कौन बोला? ठीक है. So we'll continue tomorrow. I'll finish these 7 remaining questions and then we shall start with the next theme. I actually wanted to finish all the questions today, but हुआ नहीं है वो. हम थोड़ा सा पहले दिन से पीछे चल रहे हैं. I'll manage. Don't worry. So we have 6 days and 6 themes. ठीक है? Are you finding it useful? मतलब we should continue the same. See, I will be very honest with you. Such course doesn't exist anywhere. तो पिछले 15 दिन से मैं सर खपा रहा हूँ कि कैसे पढ़ाऊँ इसको. तो if you have any feedback also, let me know. Otherwise, I will continue same template. ठीक है? चलो, thank you.